Okay, good afternoon YouTube. Welcome back to Phatkat Collections. Today we are critiquing or reacting to a video by, looks like Watch Review, WR4k or Watch Review 4K. This was actually recommended to me by one of my subscribers or viewers, basically after a video I did from Ben's Watch Club where he reviewed an Invicta watch, a 1953 homage to one of the Rolexes. So today, because this was recommended, I thought it was a pretty good video. I did watch this, kind of skip through it a little bit this morning, and I thought this was a perfect example of a really grounded watch reviewer that has common sense, that has the ability to reason, and who is not delusional. And this is great because a lot of times, you know, when I do a watch review or I'm comparing these affordable watches to luxury brands, a lot of times I don't have like a Rolex in front of me here. So it doesn't, there's always going to be those folks who just won't take my word for it, despite that many times I've had my hands on luxury brands and never can see any real honest difference that rationalizes spending even $1,000 for the watch. It's nice where other guys like this come out and give their 2 cents. Now, a little bit about WR4k. Looks like he has 233,000 subs. I don't know if he does any kind of videos where he shows his face, but nice, clear, high-resolution 4K video that I'm doing now too. Yeah, I mean, doesn't even keyword load his videos. But this is, I think this is, I don't know how this shows up in the search engine or on YouTube, but great video. Again, this is a guy who, it's one thing for folks who watch my reviews and say, oh, well, you don't have a Rolex there in front of you, or you've never actually held a Rolex. Like one guy, I always repeat this, he says, turn the bezel on a Rolex and then you'll see the difference when referring to like an Invicta. And so this is what I always find super comical. The Rolex fanboy. And again, this isn't, I don't want this video is about bashing Rolex, okay? Rolex is an amazing company. They do make a quality watch, but it's an overpriced watch, again, in my opinion. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't buy it. If your heart is set on having the actual Rolex, great. I understand what the allure is. I get it. It's a luxury brand. It's like women who want to have a Louis Vuitton purse. I do think it's more of a feminine quality to want to wear something based on the brand. It's not like wearing a band shirt, although the argument could be made. I wear a lot of band shirts, you know, Poison and Def Leppard. I like those. I like those bands. Are they my favorite? And my fanboys, am I going to go see them? No, I can't really say that I have a favorite band. I have a lot of favorites, right? And I do like those kinds of shirts. So it'd be the same thing if we're being honest, for somebody to tell me that I'm a band fanboy, right? But I get it. I understand it. Always buy what you like. Wear what, you know, it is an expression of yourself. But a lot of guys will buy Rolex because they think that it's going to give others a perception of wealth and success. And really anybody who knows anything about watches knows that it's just an overpriced item. And typically females tend to buy brands based on or choose products based on the brand name. That's why Louis Vuitton is so popular with their monogramming, right? It's in your face, it's gaudy, it's loud. It's letting you know, hey, this is a Louis and this person spent $800 on their bag, right? By all means, if you like it, buy it. I'm not telling you not to, but the point is that you can buy a bag for $30 at Walmart that does the same thing, that will look nice and last just as long in many cases. Again, there's no guarantee with how long something's gonna last. So, with a guy like this who actually has the Invicta, it looks like he has the 89260B versus the model number 16610 Rolex Submariner. We're going to find out what he has to say. And this is not a guy who doesn't like Invicta. He's not a guy who doesn't like Rolex. He's giving this an honest, fair shake on each watches. And I'm just going to react to this and see if the things that he says I agree with, right? And this, no matter what we do, no matter how we, for us guys who are, you know, rational thinkers and can reason, no matter what we do, you're always going to have the folks who are just, they're, I don't know how to say it, they don't have the ability, I mean, nice, I want to say brain dead, but that's not the case, right? They just don't have the ability to reason and to just accept facts when you tell them. That's part of the problem with our country now. There is no, like, it's hard for some folks, they go down these rabbit holes, and I feel like Rolex is another type of rabbit hole, watches specifically, where folks are constantly looking to buy the better watch, but really they're all really nice, right? There's always going to be quality differences, absolutely. I'm sure we're going to see some quality differences between this Invicta and Rolex, but one does not make the other a piece of garbage, right? they both are nice watches. So let's begin. If you do pop into the chat, we don't have any subscribers or any participants right now, but as you pop in here, as this gets pushed to YouTube feed, by all means, say hello. If you disagree with me, say so, no problem. Just be respectful, otherwise you will get the boot, homeboy. So, all right, let's begin.
6OB with my Rolex Submariner date 16610. The Pro Diver is currently available on amazon.co.uk for €109. The Submariner date 16610 was discontinued in 2010, and like all Rolex Submariner dates that have been discontinued, prices have appreciated since it was discontinued. It's currently available on chrono24.com for €8,500 to €14,000 respectively. I purchased mine from a dealer in Milan in Italy for €14,500.
14, did I hear that right? €14,500. So this is a guy who, he owns his Rolex, right? So that's a lot different than me reviewing. This guy spent his hard-earned money on this watch, paid €14,000 for this Rolex watch, and about €110 for the Invicta. That's about the going price. Actually, it's not correct. Actually, you can get these Invicta on sale for about $70 during the holidays, and say about 120 USD, at least in the States. Rolex, I'm not sure what that one will get you or cost you in the States. This is a discontinued Rolex, so naturally, Rolex is an amazing company where people will spend money on this watch because it's discontinued for, extremely minor differences between even this and its newer brother, right? So it is an amazing company, no matter how you want to look at that. They have got people this pumped up about their brand that they will rationalize this kind of money for a stainless steel watch.
I was willing to pay a premium for it because it is a rare December 2010 version, and it's one of the last 16610s produced before it's discontinued, and also...
So obviously a guy who knows Rolex, I wouldn't be able to tell you any of that information. Definitely only a guy who knows about the different model numbers and is truly a Rolex fan will know any of that information. As many watches as I have, as much as the time that I spent over the years, like looking at watches and enjoying them. I guess I'm not really, if I was in the market for a Rolex, I would just choose one, buy it, and that would kind of be the end of it. I wouldn't really go into the history of the different model numbers. So this guy maybe sells, not really sure, but he even stated he paid a premium. So he paid a premium for a watch that he knows really isn't, I don't want to say worth it, because obviously it is worth it because he paid for it, right? But he knows that he probably overpaid for it. Whether he can sell it for more, time will tell. But it is interesting that he used those specific words. Kyle, what's up, man?
So it was in new old stock condition, so a very rare December 2010 new old stock piece.
So I just want to stop here too. Like, these are great pictures. These are great video quality. When I look at both these watches look great. One, in my opinion, I think you really have to nitpick and kind of, again, I use the word delusional not. It's not really to upset anybody. It's really an honest way of describing somebody who would look at these two watches and say that Rolex just makes the Invicta look like crap. I don't know how anybody can honestly say that, at least based on this picture, right? And I do feel like if you say that, you're either lying or you're delusional. You're seeing something that isn't there.
So firstly, let's look at the boxes that the watches come in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of both pieces. So the Invicta Pro Diver comes in this cardboard watch box. This is a disappointment. Previously, the Pro Diver was supplied by Invicta in a vinyl coated watch box with a hinged lid, which was higher quality. Now, the reason why they've downgraded to cardboard from using the vinyl coated watch box.
So the vinyl coated watch box, I can't honestly say that if all the Invictas that I have, any of them came in a vinyl coated watch box. So I think just maybe he's referring to maybe a very limited window of every Invicta watch of all the over 50 that I have. Every single one, no matter what they cost, came in one of these yellow boxes. A little different than that. They're some of them are a little larger. That's not the typical Invicta box that I would normally get. But they all come in a yellow cardboard box with the exception of their dive case, which is more like a Pelican case.
It is a clear cost-cutting measure with regards to production costs. By reducing the production cost per piece, they therefore...
But again, I don't really think that that's a disappointment. You have to take into account that this is a $100 watch. It's So I can't really, I think it's a nice box. You know, it's not a display piece. It's bright yellow. I'm not a big fan, but I can't say it's disappointing. When you look at other watches in that $100 range, that box blows away Pagani Design, Steel Dive, Tactical Frog, a lot of the AliExpress Chinese brands you're going to get. This box blows away Citizen. I mean, maybe not all Citizen boxes, but at least the Citizen that I'm wearing today, thank you, Mr. Perez, the box is pretty unimportant in my opinion.
Will increase their profit margin per piece. And as you can see, the interior is now cardboard. It used to be fully upholstered with an aesthetically pleasing yellow.
Yeah, I don't know which box he's referring to. Again, of all the Invicta boxes I have, I've never had one vinyl coated that was more aesthetically pleasing than this.
Velour fabric, but now it's just cardboard inside. And in the base, the Pro Diver now sits on a piece of foam. It used to sit on a padded pillow cushion, which was upholstered with velour fabric to a good standard.
Yep, some of the larger boxes I have did come with like a pillow, but who cares? I mean, again, yeah, he's just being, you know, real with what he's seeing. I get
and
it.
The base is now cardboard. It used to be plastic, which was velour fabric coated. So it's disappointing to see a watch brand cut quality of their watches, or alternatively cut the quality of their watch boxes. Watch brands should always endeavour.
So I ask folks this: would you rather a watch brand cut quality on the watch box or the watch? So I just find that this is really nitpicking. I'd much rather have a company wrap that fucker in bubble wrap and send it to me if they turn around and says, yeah, we improved on this. Even if it's something that I don't even like. Let's say that the Invicta, and again, I don't know if cutting the watch quality of the box equates to that much to make up the difference for, let's say, adding a sapphire crystal. Very unlikely, but all these things are important to the watch collectors. So I'd much rather them not include the box, and maybe, you know, if you know that the community of people, you know, let's say the masses of people, you're a brand, you're trying to sell watches, if the mass of people are saying, hey, you know, with this particular Invicta watch, I don't like this small little you know, nuance, I think it would be definitely in Invicta's best interest to improve that and then cheapen the box. As far as not giving a box, I think most people do want a box, but I could care less. If I had the option to save $5 on a box and, you know, get a discount, I'd always choose that. Wrap it in bubble wrap, throw it in a friggin' bubble wrap mailer and send it to me. I really don't care.
To improve the quality of their watches and their watch boxes, respectively. So let's look at the 166.
That's a Rolex. Look at that thing. Dirty ass cardboard. I hope he's not going to start with being like, this is great, because right now this is a 14,000 pound watch, and that's the presentation. Not impressed so far, folks.
10 watch box. It comes in a vinyl coated wooden box, which is protected by a cardboard box and this cardboard outer sleeve. So one removes the sleeve, and this is the lid to the cardboard watch box. It's embossed with a Rolex coronet.
Look at that, dude. That's a 14,000 pound. I mean, I'm not hearing anything negative yet. So, I mean, it's just surprising to me that this is okay. The Invicta watch box looks cheap, but this is his words, roughly, right? I'm paraphrasing, but basically, in a nutshell, the quality of the Invicta box is not pleasing, but yet there's no comment about this fucking thing. Like, are you kidding me? This is starting where I start to see a delusion here, a double standard when it comes to anytime somebody references a Rolex or reviews a Rolex.
As you can see, inside we have the wooden watch box, which is vinyl coated with the gold coronet embossed. So I'll show you the watch box. On the base in gilt, it has Rolex SA, Geneva Swiss, and the reference number of the box, because often these are counterfeited, and this is a correct box.
All right, so yeah, they put a little marking, I guess, referencing the model number. I'm not sure what those numbers meant there, but I have many watch boxes that look like this, many. And I can tell you right now, I've seen many of these boxes coming from China that come with their $50 fakes, and they are just as nice as this. I see no difference.
As you can see, it's got a nice grained finish to it, which is like leather. I personally would prefer
like leather, but not leather.
Rolex to use wooden watch boxes coated in genuine leather rather than this vinyl.
For 14,000 pounds, yeah. I mean, I can show you guys. I don't know if you guys want to see a presentation. Check out the video I did. It's old video, but Visser Dive watches and Aqua Dive. That watch box at that price point, those watches, $1,000 to $2,000 for one of those watches, blows this completely out of the water. Keep in mind, guys, we are talking about a 14,000 pound watch. Comes in this piece of dog shit.
Green because I think that it doesn't look as good as genuine leather, although this is the watch box they were using in 2010. Hinged lid, and the interior has a lighter tone of velour fabric in green, and also we have the Rolex coronet in gilt with Rolex in Garamond fonts, which is serified. There's a pocket beneath the lid, and that houses the leather wallet, which I'll show you for the warranty card. Base is nicely upholstered with the light green velour fabric, and the watch sits in the base on a padded pillow cushion, which is also upholstered to a good standard. So this was actually similar to the...
So again, this is bizarre to me. I hope the rest of the video, and I've watched the video, it's pretty good. But seriously, we're kind of glazing over the fact that this watch box is not really much different than the Invicta. It's cardboard, and the only differences I'm seeing is a slightly different shaped pillow and just something that's more cosmetic. This watch box is mildly a little nicer than the Invicta box. So why are we just kind of like blazing right past this fact? Mr. Pro Ghostly, welcome, my man. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it on the I'm leaving it on the participant section here just so I can see who pops in here. But yeah, drop a comment, guys, when you get in. I do appreciate that. Yeah, man, and you are very welcome, man. I'm glad you guys are liking the content. I'm doing these in a respectful way for the most part. And so yeah, it's nice to kind of critique and set my opinion out there, right? All right, so let's continue on.
The Invicta padded pillow cushion and the interior of the Invicta vinyl watch boxes they were using before they downgraded to the cardboard box I showed you. There really was...
That is cardboard. I mean, I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm 99% certain this is a cardboard Rolex box. This doesn't look like wood. This looks like a coated cardboard box. So I just can't believe that we're not even mentioning the fact that Invicta gives you that amazing box for 99 bucks, 100 bucks, and for 14,000 pounds, that's the piece of shit you get with a watch that costs 14,000 pounds. Check out my Aqua Dive. Beautiful, big, huge box. I think it has glass on it. All hardwood piano black. Heck, even the Duxo boxes are like this hardwood gloss Ferrari looking red kind of finish. Like, this is a piece of shit.
Wasn't that much difference between an Invicta watch box and the Rolex watch box. They were very similar up until recently.
They're still similar. Those are similar boxes.
So I'll show you the items you get with the two watches. This is the plastic tag that comes with the Pro Diver, Invicta winged emblem, and also Invicta logo. On the reverse, you have the QR code for the Pro Diver, reference 8926OB, which is the automatic version.
Why do they call them reference numbers? I find this so annoying. It's like this like pompous bullshit, classy-ish. They try to be classy, like this is the reference number. I joke about this all the time, but it's a fucking model number. Every other product out there, every other like car manufacturer, they're all called models. Where this thing came from, the reference number, is the most pompous bunch of horseshit that I've ever heard.
You also get this cardboard warranty card. Now, I'm pleased to report that the Invicta Pro Diver is covered by a 2-year international warranty, which is very good because this is a €109 low-tier price point piece.
What's up, baby?
1 year of warranty is standard for low-tier pieces. 2 year is exceptional, but you can register your piece online, and that will extend the 2-year warranty to 3 years. And really, 3 years is unprecedented for a low-tier piece costing €109. Invicta deserve full credit for that.
Glad he's recognizing that. And for anybody who says like some people will say when it comes to the warranty, oh, dealing with Invicta is awful. I have heard that people do have bad times dealing with Invicta if you have to have your watch serviced, but I've also heard on other people's experiences that have been amazing, where you actually receive a tracking number, not like a postal tracking number, but I guess it'd be like in this case, a reference number to the repair. And you can track it with like these little bullet points. It shows you received watch, diagnosing. Again, I've never had to go through this because I've never had one fail that I needed to send off. And other than, I should have sent the Grand Diver. I've mentioned that before. But other than that, like, you know, I've heard nothing but good things. That's not correct. I've heard mainly good things, some negative things. So
with the 16610, you get this plastic bezel protector. Often this is missing. And also you get a plastic hologram tag, as you can see, and this certifies that the movement used, which is the caliber 3135, is officially certified as a Swiss chronometer.
Yeah, so this is just kind of funny. So both get plastic tags, right, at these price points, right? And I'm just being honest here. Both get these little plastic tags, And, you know, I thought it'd be kind of cool if, like, Rolex included, like, a solid gold tag or something like that. But whatever, that's just my opinion. Just kind of, you know, I mean, it's just interesting. A $100 watch gets a plastic tag. 14,000 pound watch gets a plastic tag. And that this thing just printed in plastic officially certifies it. Like, that's not an official chronometer certification. I know the watch is, but it's like, don't you think you'd include, like, some kind of official certificate for that? Not this Rolex-produced piece of shit plastic tag? Just saying.
So the caliber 3135 is certified both by COSC and also by Rolex themselves as being a superlative chronometer, which is accurate to -2 to +2 seconds per day.
And keep in mind that I forget which watch channel they took an Invicta Pro Diver. I think the same reference number, regulated it and got it within chronometer specifications, COSC certified chronometer specifications. Just gotta keep that in mind out of an NH35.
And I'll show you the other items. You get this leather wallet, and this is housed in the pocket I showed you beneath the hinged lid. Ooh. And this houses the plastic warranty card, and on the reverse we have Rolex in gilt with a coronet. It's genuine leather. Very
stepping up a little bit there. I think that's kind of cool.
Aesthetically pleasing. And we have the service manual. And I'll show you the warranty card. As you can see, we have the authorised dealer number 170, which is Milan in Italy. The reference number of the piece, 16610.
See, that's
for
probably
security.
Where reference comes from, is because probably if you're looking at, I assume that's, again, butcher me if you will, but I don't know what language I'm looking at. Is that, I'm not sure where it says Ref Montre. Is that, what is that? Not, it can't, it's not French. Is that Swiss? Some kind. I mean, there's obviously a different language here. So maybe in that particular language they don't have the word model, so they call them reference. So again, in America, we can just call it a fucking reference number.
I've blacked out the serial number.
Just kidding. In America, we should just call it a model number because everything else in America is a model number, right? But I get it. There's probably a language difference there. That's the only thing I can assume on where reference Montre. I'm surprised that folks in America just don't say reference Montre, ref Montre, anytime they reference a Rolex watch, but
because I don't want the piece to be counterfeited. And we have
okay, so that's not going to stop this piece from being counterfeited. You can get super fakes that are going to fool Rolex ADs that come with something like this. So
model,
even at $50, they come with something like this.
Perpetual, because the Submariner date is an Oyster Perpetual. And on the reverse, we have the authorised dealer in Milan in Italy. This is a December 2010 piece. It's one of the last 16610s made. And you can see the name of the purchaser is filled in as X. Now, Rolex authorised dealers used to have a policy that when you purchased the watch, you didn't have to have your name put on the warranty card. For example, celebrities prefer to remain anonymous, so the authorised dealer could put X's instead of the celebrity's name. But they subsequently changed their policy so that the purchaser had to put their name on the warranty card. But back in 2010, you could have X's put on the warranty card if you wanted to remain anonymous rather than...
That's probably more the exception than the rule. I think most people who buy a Rolex sure as fuck don't want to be anonymous. They want to scream it, shout it, wave their arm around so somebody notices that boring-ass watch. I'm just kidding, folks. The Rolex is a fine brand. It's a nice-looking watch. I mean, again, most people who buy a Rolex do not want to remain anonymous with the fact that they have one, right? But I get why, you know, a celebrity or somebody, it's, you know, more high profile would.
Your real name. So I'll show you the two booklets that come with the watch. You get this Oyster booklet, which is known as instruction manual, and it's in Italian because this watch was originally in Italy. I don't regard the Submariner date as a €14,500 piece, which is what I paid for it. The reality is, the Submariner date 16610 is a €2,000 watch, which is retailed at a higher price point.
Yes.
And now it's
thank you very much, Rolex owner, for referencing that. You hear what he says? He says that this is a 2,000 pound watch that's sold as 14,000, right? This is incredible to me. Again, a lot of folks, a lot of Rolex fanboys will tell you that you have to spend this much money. Say, again, people are going to butcher me about this because every time I say 10,000, 14, the prices are all over the place. But just for argument's sake, for the purpose of this video, just to kind of keep it simple, let's just say Rolex Submariners are $10,000 watches, right? People will tell you that you have to spend that because the quality is so amazing. That's what it costs to manufacture. Absolute bullshit.
Discontinued, the price has appreciated beyond that, but I always saw it as a €2,000 watch, not a €14,000 piece.
Euro watch.
So
yeah, I agree. When I look at watches like this, when I look at that Invicta, my mind says that's a $500 watch for what you're getting when you compare it to a lot of other watch brands charging that. The quality you're going to get on this Invicta is more comparable watches in the $300 to $500 price range. The Rolex is really a $1,000 watch because if you could, in my opinion, right? He's saying 2,000 pound. You could easily get watches in that price point that are going to be just as nice. And in my opinion, I think this Invicta is just as nice as this Rolex. I haven't seen anything yet that really makes me say, oh man, there's the difference. Bingo. Haven't seen it yet.
with regards to the dimensions, you can see the Pro Diver 8926 OB is clearly an homage to the Submariner Date 16610. They both have 40mm case diameters, so I'll talk you through both dimensions and I'll explain the two notable differences in dimensions. 40mm head of the piece, and then we have a lug-to-lug measurement of 48mm, a thickness of 14mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The Oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 18mm at the flip lock clasp. So with regards to the 16610, 40mm head of the piece, we have a lug-to-lug measurement of 47.2mm, a thickness of 12.7mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The Oyster bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the flip lock clasp. So let's just compare the two clasps. They're not actually very different, both pressed stainless steel. The Invicta uses 316.
So both pressed stainless steel. Really, so far, the only difference is the Rolex is 904, the Invicta is 316. So what is the advantage to 904? In real world use, absolutely none. I know a lot of folks will tell you that nothing polishes quite like Oyster steel. Doesn't have that quite the same sheen. That's complete nonsense. That's delusional talk. That's pretending something's there that isn't to rationalize the cost. When you look at both these, they look exactly the same. And if you took the brands off this, you would not be able to tell me which was 316 and which was 904. The advantage to 904 is that it's got, I believe, a higher nickel content. It allows the material to be more corrosion resistant to specific chemicals. And so naturally, this type of material is used in like chemical plants and places like that where they need something that's really going to resist corrosion better than 316. For real world use, wearing on your wrist, this is just overkill. You don't need this. Rolex uses this because they can rationalize charging more for their watches. Again, this is something that I like to call manufacturer desire. It's to basically say, hey, you know, this is, it's for instance, it's like putting a windshield on a car or glass in a car, in a Honda Accord, and being like, yep, we use a proprietary blah, blah, blah type of glass, which is actually bulletproof, right? But we're going to charge you, $5,000 more for the car. People are going to look at that and say, well, that's great if somebody wants to open fire on me, but what are the odds of that actually happening, right? I mean, again, there are some folks who are like high-profile people that need stuff like that. There is a market for bulletproof cars, the president, things like that, lots of other people. But for the average person, they don't need bulletproof glass in their car. So it's like a company basically saying, hey, we offer bulletproof glass in your Honda Accord, but yeah, we're going to charge you more for it, whether you like it or not. And so it's completely something you're never going to use. It brings you no real world advantage. So again, nothing wrong with it, but you're paying a lot more for this watch.
6L grade, and the Submariner Date uses 904L Oyster steel. So 316 and 904L.
Oyster steel. It's still 904. That's Rolex putting their own little brand name on it.
As you can see, similar luster, similar silver tone to them, but the
absolutely similar luster, similar tone, identical in my opinion.
904L is blended differently. But if you look at the gauge of the two flip-lock clasps,
I've always thought that, and I could be wrong in this, but my opinion is that Rolex uses 904 to keep watches, keep the resale value higher in the pre-owned market, because if you have a softer metal with more nickel content, and for you guys who are, again, remember, I'm just speaking from what I know, that some softer metal can polish easier, and you can kind of bring it back to life a little easier in 316. That's my opinion of it. I could be wrong, but
clasp, you can see they both have a very light gauge of stainless steel, and there's not that much difference in the proportions of the flip locks. The coronet is embossed, which is aesthetically pleasing, versus the Invicta winged emblem and Invicta logo engraved, but they're both finished to very similar standards.
And they're both aesthetically pleasing. Just want to make that very clear. He gave the Rolex an aesthetically pleasing comment. That is subjective. One is not better than the other.
The Pro Diver deserves credit because the mirror polishing is done to a good standard, full micro adjustment holes, and the brushed satin finishing has a beautiful luster, no sharp edges, no burrs, doesn't have sharp corners. It's actually a very well made pressed stainless steel clasp. Same applies to the Submariner dates clasp. As you can see, mirror polished, full micro adjustment holes, beautiful luster to the 904 oyster steel, and needless to say, no sharp edges, no burrs, doesn't have sharp corners. So I'll show you the interiors, and you can see they're actually very similar in terms of the quality. And this is something I want to level criticism at Rolex for, because all throughout the...
Evan, welcome. Adrian, let me catch up. Evan said, are we really comparing a $100 watch to a $1,000 watch? So again, here's our first comment in the chat here. Like, this is not something you can do. This has been done by many, many very well-respected watch reviewers, whether you like me or not, or hate me or don't like me, you think I'm stupid, whatever. The fact of the matter is you can absolutely compare a $100 watch to a $1,000 watch. And this isn't a $1,000 watch. This is a 14,000 pound watch to be exact. So again, you can compare anything. This is where a lot of times, and forgive me, Evan, if you're not making this point, but I think this is where the delusion comes in from folks who say you can't compare these two. We're comparing them right in this video by a pretty well-respected watch reviewer who owns both these watches. Not like me, who's like, this is my opinions. I don't have the Rolex to share with you. This is 4K resolution. We're seeing it right in front of us. But a lot of the Rolex fanboys refuse to see what's right in front of their face. They just, it doesn't, their brain starts to malfunction. So let's continue on. But right now we have two clasps, one 904, one 316, both stamped. I see no difference so far in the quality of these clasps. And it sounds like the reviewer feels the same way.
Production of the 16610 until 2010 when it was
Now, I will state that Rolex has improved their clasps. I don't know about all the different Rolex models. I'm pretty sure that the more modern ones come with like their, I don't know what this is called. It's like their diver extension. I think that's a pretty nice clasp. I'd say it's definitely nicer than the Invicta. And really, any watch brand with a milled clasp makes both these watches look inferior, right? They both do the same thing. Both these are solid, good quality clasp. They will work. The watch is not going to break and fall off. However, keep in mind, one's $100, the other one's 14,000 pounds. So what are we paying for here? Where's this big difference I'm supposed to see?
Discontinued. They use these pressed stainless steel clasps. As you can see, it's made from 904 oyster steel. But if you look at the quality of the two clasps, you can see they're both actually very similar. The main difference is on the Pro Diver, it's tapered, but on the Submariner dates, you can see it's parallel and straight. It doesn't.
And these two differences between the clasps have nothing to do with quality. One is not better. One is tapered, one is not. That's just a difference in manufacturing. There is no difference in quality there. One is not better.
Taper. But credit where credit's due. The Pro Diver mirror polishing is good. The hinge pins are a tight fit. The quality control and the tolerances are good. No sharp edges, no burrs, and it actually feels like a very comfortable clasp. Usually I'm critical of watch brands in the low tier using pressed stainless steel clasps such as this one, because now the industry standard in 2024 has become solid milled 316L grade.
That's not really the industry standard. It depends on the brand. Many watch brands still use stamped clasp. So I'm going to correct them on that, of course. It just depends on the watch. Generally, you will find the stamped clasp like this, or the pressed clasp, on inexpensive watches because it's cheaper to manufacture. But I've seen many watches that I have in my collection that have milled clasps that are in that $150 price point. So it totally depends on the watch and what the brand decides to do.
Stainless steel clasps. It's a clear cost-cutting measure, still used by Seiko, which I'm critical of. That.
Yeah, he may be critical of Seiko. I may be, but a lot of these fanboys are not. It's like the same old argument. If you're a Rolex fanboy, you will give a free pass to Seiko and Casio and Timex, but everybody else, ooh, watch out.
Seiko is still using pressed stainless steel clasps rather than solid milled stainless steel clasps. But, however, this was the style of clasp used on the 16610, and the Pro Diver is an homage to it, so it's actually accurate because, as you can see, it's pressed 904L oyster steel. Nice detail to it.
No, you can't see 904. You can't see that. There is no visual difference between these two. You can't tell one's 904 and one's 316. You can see that it's a pressed or stamped clasp made of stainless steel, but you can't tell one's 904 versus 316. I don't think he's meaning that. I just want to clarify that.
Because we've got the embossed Rolex, as you can see. No sharp edges, no burrs. Needless to say, the hinge pins are a tight fit. The tolerances are good, the quality control is good. But this was a clear cross-cutting measure prior to the glide lock clasp being introduced in 2011.
The glide lock, that's what I was trying to think of.
In the successor to the 16610, which was the 116610LN, the Submariner dates I've previously owned and reviewed on my channel. So the glide lock clasp was a notable enhancement.
Yeah, I think it's a nice way of wording it. It's not better, it's just an enhancement. And I think if we're using that word enhancement when describing a lot of the differences in watches, I think it's a more accurate way of describing. It's not better. The glide lock is not a better clasp than this. It's just an enhanced clasp. Has a little bit of extra feature, the adjustability, right, on the fly if you wear a wetsuit, or just if your wrist swells a little bit. Pretty cool. I think subjectively it looks nicer, but it's not better. It's still, these both function just as well, right?
Because it gave micro adjustment versus the 4 micro adjustment holes in the flanks. It does snap shut with a nice positive click, and the secondary click of the flip lock is good. So the two clasps are actually very similar, despite the massive price difference between the two pieces, and this is why I say the Submariner Dates 16610 is a €2,000 watch. It's not a €14,500 watch, which is what I paid for it. So two notable differences between the dimensions: the taper of the bracelets. 20 to 18 on the Pro Diver versus 20 to 16. I regard 20 to 16 as perfection.
I don't. Again, that is subjective. He's speaking based on what he finds more comfortable. I don't think anybody, if I'm being honest, I don't think anybody is going to, if you blindfold somebody and they have no, even this guy, if you were to have, let me just try to articulate this. Generally, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between either of these watches on your wrist. And I would be hard-pressed to think that if you put this watch on the wrist, blindfold this guy, go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then go ahead and stop and say, okay, which one do you have on your wrist? He would not be able to tell the difference.
And I really like the oyster bracelets on.
Without maybe feeling it, right? But just on your wrist, closing your eyes, that's like me saying, oh, yeah, no, I have a Citizen on the wrist. Like, you can't tell the difference. That's just not... Anybody who says that, I call bullshit on that.
The Submariner Dates, and credit where credit's due. The Pro Diver bracelet is also aesthetically pleasing, but Invicta have made a mistake by using mirror polished sensor links. It does.
Well, I don't think it's a mistake. I think they're making a watch that's... It's just like, you could say they're making a mistake in putting the giant Invicta engraving on the side. They're doing that, so they're making a homage watch, this watch, but they're really not trying to copy it. They're like basically saying, if I'm going to put words in their mouth, is that they're basically saying, hey, we're making this watch. It gives you the feel, the look, the nice quality of a Rolex Submariner, but we're going to make it clear that it's not, right? And maybe that was due to possible lawsuits. I don't know. Everyone, their brother makes one, so I can't imagine Rolex would have just picked on Invicta, but you never know. They just want to stand out and say, hey, you know what, we're trying to copy this watch, but we're letting you know, like, we're doing it.
Does look better on a dive piece to have brushed satin finish sensor links. It's also more practical.
Totally subjective. Totally subjective. What one thinks looks better is totally subjective. However, I do agree with the practicality. If you're a diver, if you are diving and you're putting your watch to some kind of, even if you're not diving and you generally don't take off your watch, I generally, if I'm going to wear a watch and I know I'm going to be doing something a little more physical, I will try to stay away from polished links, polished watches. Again, I have tons of them. What I'm saying is, if I'm going to go work on my car or be out working in the backyard and I decide to wear a watch while doing so, I'm generally not going to wear something with mirror polishing because it definitely scratches easier.
Cool, because mirror polished sensor links tend to show scuffs and scratches more. They're okay on a day.
And Kyle just said gold subs have the polished centers on the bracelet. So, yeah, again, it's just the same watch is made with gold. It's just another model difference, right?
Daily wear piece or a dress piece, but with a dive piece, it's more practical to have brushed satin finishing, and it doesn't.
You know what I think is more practical on a dive piece is to not wear a 14,000 pound watch. I think that this Invicta, polished or not, is much more practical to use if you are going to go diving somewhere. And again, not depth rating is the important factor here, right? We just pretend for a second that both these watches are capable of the same depth. The Invicta is way more practical because if you lose it, you're not going to be bent out of shape about it. If you mess it up, if it something's defective and it leaks, right? That's the more practical watch to go doing something like diving, but I digress.
Doesn't show the scratches on the bracelet as much. The taper on the Pro Diver doesn't look as good. 18
Subjective, I think it looks just as good.
18mm looks too wide.
And I'm not saying that because it's Invicta. I personally do not nitpick watches enough where I'm like, oh man, this taper really looks that much better. You know what I mean? They both look nice. These are both nice watches. I have tapered bracelets. I have non-tapered. I have 30mm bracelets and 22mm bracelets.
Wide and too straight and parallel at the clasp. 16mm on the Submariner date looks better. It's the correct proportion. So I think that Invicta should have used the same proportions, 20:16 versus 20:18.
Totally opinion, totally subjective. I like that Invicta did their own thing. This way we don't have to hear, well, people still say, but they don't say, oh, Invicta copies Rolex. Yeah, there's lots of brands. Invicta's not the only one making a homage watch to a Submariner. There's hundreds of thousands. I don't know how many, hundreds, thousands. There's a lot of watches made to copy the Submariner. It's not that unique of a watch. So it's like anytime we have a round watch, 42mm with a 3-link bracelet, people are like, oh, it's a homage.
Now, the other notable difference in
this one is a homage.
In the dimensions, and it's the main negative of the Pro Diver is the thickness. It has a bubble back exhibition case back, as you can see, and this adds 1mm of thickness to the overall thickness of the piece. It's 14mm. Now, I'll put this into perspective. The quartz version of the Pro Diver, which I previously reviewed, the 26970 quartz, is only 11.4mm. It's actually thinner than my Submariner dates, which is 12.7. 11.4 is very thin, and that's thanks to it using a low-profile Seiko PC32 quartz. This is 14, and anything below 13 will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff. It's very comfortable.
And I call BS on that too. Yeah, definitely if a watch is, common sense will tell you if a watch is thinner, it's going to slip under a shirt. I could tell you that if we're taking a watch like my Sea Hunter, which is like 23mm thick, if you go throwing on a dress shirt, it kind of looks ridiculous because it's popping out. Your sleeve can't cover it. But depends on how tight you wear your sleeves, right? Let's face it. I look at the population and the way people dress, and I almost feel like, most people aren't getting, they're buying dress shirts off the rack, right? And so generally, you have 2 buttons on a dress shirt, and how easy is it just to go ahead and use the second button? So again, 1mm difference, I think is what he said. This is nitpicking, right? This Invicta, I can assure you, this Invicta will go under a dress shirt. Welcome, George. What's up, my man? He says, I own both, and sometimes I confuse both specifically if I'm in a rush. Thank you for stating that, sir.
Comfortable, but anything in excess of 13 sits too tall on the wrist, and it makes the watch feel top heavy. So I'll give you wrist.
No, it does not. The watch does not feel top heavy. That is subjective. Again, maybe to this gentleman, he may think it feels top heavy, but I don't personally think. I think a watch like a Sea Hunter at 23mm or a Hydromax at 30mm feels top heavy. I don't think you're going to feel a difference of 1mm, 2mm on a watch. I think that is just kind of fine. He's just trying to prove a point here, which he doesn't really. I don't think he's actually truly going to feel the difference. Again, I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Shots of both pieces, and then you'll see exactly what I'm.
And I'm not coming down on him. He's not bashing the watch. So far, everything he's saying, I agree with. But except for these little tiny differences, this is where guys are just nitpicking the hell out of a watch. But keep in mind that this guy's nitpicking 1mm in describing comfort. I think this guy, if there's a huge quality difference, is going to nitpick the hell out of these watches. So let's see what else he has to say.
I'm referring to. Look at the huge gap due to the bubble back case back. There's a huge gap beneath the tips of the lugs.
Yeah, so I agree with that. The Invicta is definitely going to kind of, I don't think it looks weird, but it's definitely not going to sit flat on the wrist. It does have that angled case back that does pop the watch up off the wrist a little bit. It's not something I worry about. I feel like a lot of times luxury watch guys just really sit around. And I'm not dissing this guy at all, but I do feel like sometimes they sit around and just like look for things like, I feel like these people don't have jobs. I know they do, but I don't know what they do, but I just feel like this is something you just kind of sit around if you're bored, like staring at and worrying about. Like, I just don't look at watches quite like this.
And it also pulls the end link in the bracelet tool because this doesn't use male end links. As you can see, it has hollow folded end links, which are like a female end link. But you can see there's a huge gap beneath the undercuts of the case. It sits top heavy and tall on the wrist, 1mm too tall. So at 14mm, this is more difficult to...
And just to be clear, like, nothing wrong with him saying it's 1mm too tall for his preferences. But for my preferences, this is meaningless, this difference.
Slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. It just doesn't wrap around the wrist as well. It's not as snug due to the large gap. And when you flex the hand and the wrist like that, you can see it exacerbates the bobble back case back sitting.
These are really things to nitpick about. I mean, this watch is going to be, both these watches are going to be comfortable. And I know that is subjective. Maybe somebody has really sensitive wrists. I don't know, but I don't think that you're going to put on any of these watches and suddenly be like, oh my God, man, I just can't wear this Invicta. And it's just kind of what these guys, making issues of little things like this are just making a mountain out of a molehill, like I like to say. And this is just not something that, if people are truly being honest, that they're worried about. I can guarantee you, and George, you can maybe speak to this, if you own both these watches, then, do you put the Invicta on and be like, dude, man, this Invicta is really bugging me today. I knew I should have went with the Rolex. I was wearing it for, I knew when I had to wear this watch for 8 hours, I should have chose the Rolex and not the Invicta. I just call bullshit on that.
Tool on wrist.
Absolutely with a Sea Hunter. Absolutely. But those things weigh a pound.
They could have corrected this very easily by using a solid stainless steel case back as per the quartz version, the 26970.
Well, I think the reason they use that case back, and I see this on a lot of NH35 movements, is because I think the NH35 is thicker, definitely than the quartz movement, and probably thicker than the genuine Rolex movement. So they probably have to put an extended case back to clear the rotor. That's just my assumption here. George just said, as you mentioned a while back, the fellows all find that if they own a Rolex, they have reached the monarchy of success. That is only they can own. Yeah, true. Not that difficult to get a Rolex, folks. Again, everybody's situation is different. I'm a middle-class working guy, and I could buy a Rolex tomorrow. Cash money if I wanted to.
Zero. This uses an exhibition case back.
Maybe because I don't have an $800 a month car payment like a lot of people do.
Glazed mineral crystal, and they've made it too thick in order to give it 200 meters.
They didn't make it too thick. They made it how they made it, and that is subjective. These are things I don't like when people say things that are definitive when this is just something that's subjective to him personally. The proper way of describing this is, I think for my taste, for the way I wear watches, I would prefer this thinner, not to state they made it too thick. That's basically definitive, stating that they made a mistake, and they didn't, because this doesn't bother me. So if it doesn't bother me, I'm sure it doesn't bother many people, because this watch continues to sell like hotcakes.
Of hermetic seal. The problem with using exhibition case backs as per the Seiko 5KX, which only has 100 meters of hermetic seal, in order to make it water resistant to 200 meters, they need to make the crystal thicker, and that adds 1mm of thickness to the case back.
I don't think that's correct in this case. If I am wrong, then I will definitely fess up to that. I don't think that they put an exhibition window on this and had to make the case back thicker because they use a thicker glass to get the water resistance. I think this is something just you'll find on a lot of NH35 movements with watches of this size that aren't really large.
So had they used stainless steel, they could have reduced it to 13, but it's 14.
I don't think so at all. I think the reason they use that is because they need the watch to actually, that case back to clear the rotor. And again, if I'm wrong, then shit, man, my bad. But I'm pretty sure I'm not.
And yes, it's nice to have an exhibition case back showing off the movement, but the negative is it makes the Pro Diver 8926 OB automatic sit too tall on the wrist.
Not too tall. It just sits taller on the wrist.
So that's the main negative. Again,
even let's just pretend for a second that we can consider that gripe definitive, like, yep, his word is the word, then that's a pretty small thing to really worry about, right?
20 to 18 taper is incorrect. It should have been 20 to 16.
If you're trying to copy the watch, yes, but they're not trying to copy the watch. Remember, homage, I hate the word homage because it means to pay respect to, but I do think that, and let's face it, a lot of these brands just make this watch because they know there's a market for people who can't afford a Rolex or don't want to spend the money on a Rolex and want that look, or they just want a basic quality watch for, good value. This is not, at least they did their own thing with it. They're not trying to one-to-one copy it. They're letting you know, hey, this is our version. I think this watch by Invicta is one of the few that really do pay homage because they're telling you, hey, you know what? This is what it's meant to look like, but we're letting you know with that huge engraving that we did this. This is our tribute to Rolex, as opposed to just making a copy. If you're truly worried about this, just get a Pagani. They're more accurate. Get a fake watch for $50. Whether you condone fakes or not, I don't really give a shit what your opinions are. I don't care if you think that you shouldn't do that. People want to get high on their horse. Ultimately, buy what you like. It makes you happy. If you want the one-to-one, get a fake, $50.
And also the exhibition case back is 1mm too thick. It makes the watch 14mm thick instead of 13. So in comparison, I'll show you my 16610 on wrist, and you can see the benefits of it having a low profile head of the piece. And although it does have a bubble back case back, it's more low profile. One doesn't have that huge
more
gap
low profile.
beneath it.
So again, we're making an excuse. It's still not flush. It's more low profile. So we're making an excuse. What if we had a watch that didn't have any case back bulge on it, right? Would we then say it's superior and way more comfortable than the Rolex? Would we go that far? Will we diss on the Rolex like that?
The tips of the lugs. Now bear in mind, this uses male end links. It doesn't use female pivoted end links.
George just said the Rolex Submariner used to run about 8K, 9K before all the insane inflation. Now they run around 13, 14K. Yeah, I think, I don't know if inflation has anything to do with this. I think that, not to get political at all, I don't think inflation has anything to do with this. I think this is just the, supply and demand. Rolex fans are just, I compare them to like Kirk Cameron teeny boppers. They're just like, oh, I gotta have it. And that just, supply and demand drives the price up. I don't think it has anything to do with inflation.
Rolex could have actually improved the fit of the 16610 by using female pivoted end links as per the Black Bay 58. Because that would have pulled the end link in the Oyster bracelet closer to the wrist. If you look, you can see there's still a gap underneath.
This is really nitpicking. if you really want to watch that's, like, if you're going to nitpick comfort like this, and I'm not saying this is wrong, this is what he finds comfortable. I can't tell him he's wrong there with this subjective description of what comfort is. But if you are this worried about comfort, like I'm sure somebody makes, I think Bulova makes one called the Curve, which kind of wraps around your wrist. Why not just get that? If comfort really is this big a deal, one would probably say, you know what? All these watches are really bothering me. I got to find something that really curves around my wrist. Then you don't buy this watch. But I just don't think this is really true. I don't think that he really finds one of these watches more comfortable. I think he's just saying this for purpose of the video. Trying to give you all the information, but it is extremely subjective in what he's saying here.
Beneath the tips of the lugs, but it does sit very snug and very close to the wrist. And this is only 12.7, so needless to say, it will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff. If you wear business shirts, it's an incredibly
1 millimeter ain't gonna make that much of a difference. I just want to be very clear in that.
Slender piece. Anything below 13 will slip underneath a shirt cuff. At 14.
Now, unless you are a guy who gets custom-made shirts and suits, and you have that suit fitted absolutely perfect, and they really didn't give a lot of tolerance there in your shirt sleeve. But most people wear off-the-rack JCPenney shirts. And, sometimes your wrist is going to swell, sometimes it's not. Let me tell you, I think my wrist will swell over a millimeter because there's times where I'll put on my watch and it definitely feels way tighter than when it did at a different time of the day. So one can easily say that if you're stating that the Rolex fits perfectly, if your wrist swells, then suddenly the Rolex is not going to fit perfectly. So I just don't buy this at all.
Millimeters. The Pro Diver is 1 millimeter too thick, and it's a real shame because it was a simple thing to get right. They should have.
I'm not, I like this guy, right? So far, I like what he's doing, but I just really don't agree with this, nitpicking, this extremely sensitive, subjective nonsense. But again, I'm not telling him what to wear, absolutely, but I do feel like if you're nitpicking comfort like this, get a Bulova Curve. I just don't really believe it is what I'm saying, because if it was a big deal, you wouldn't have spent 14,000 pounds on this watch.
Should have used a stainless steel case back rather than an exhibition case back. So the fit and comfort level of this is better, even though it's got a bubble back oyster steel case back. I'll show you the two case backs. So this one is made from 904L oyster steel. It's sterile, no engraving, very smooth and comfortable to wear for long periods of time. So as you can see,
even if it was engraved, I can give you one kind of example of this. I will state there are sometimes that your case back can bother you if it has sharp edges, and depending on the side of the watch and how tight you have to wear the watch. I do have like a couple of Invicta, like what is the one I got? One of my subaqua specialties with an NH35 movement. It's got a very sharp case back where the case back meets perfectly the edge of the case, and it is rather sharp. And the engraving on it, because those watches are so heavy, you tend to wear them with no play. They are tighter on your wrist. You can get a little Invicta logo stamp on your wrist. And sometimes if the watch is moving too much, the engraving is kind of like a friction point, and that can kind of chafe your wrist a little bit. But we're only talking about watches that are 1 pound and over, right? Generally, that does not happen to me personally on watches of this size and weight. Welcome, Julius. He says, I have two Omega divers, both in the 13.6 to 14 thickness range, and am able to slip them underneath the shirt cuff. LOL. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you for stating that. Getting the word out here like this, combating statements like this gentleman's making, although I like the video, I think definitely my feelings of this guy are not the way I feel about other YouTube influencers or watch reviewers, but it is important to kind of combat statements made that are subjective. People make statements a lot of times as factual, and that's not the case. So absolutely, Julius, knocking out of the park, 13.6 to 14, and it's able to slip under a dress shirt.
longitudinal brush.
Now again, I'll go back to one caveat to that. Yeah, when I put on a giant Sea Hunter and I'm trying to slip on my fitted leather jackets, which I tend to like to wear leather kind of tight, yeah, sometimes I have to pop the watch off to get it through the sleeve. Those are kind of the times where that is an issue, but that's a 23 millimeter watch, 57 millimeter bezel, right? You're going to have that issue with watches like that, not with 1 millimeter differences like this.
Satin finishing to the center section, which contrasts with the mirror polishing circumference, and it's coin edge finished and finished to perfection. Very smooth, sterile.
Subjective, finished to perfection. I don't know. I'd like you in order to make a statement like that, I need to see what perfection is. Because remember, anytime you wear any of these watches, even if you have a watch that's all brush finished right off the factory line, if we say this watch is perfection, when you wear it, you're going to lose that. So I don't think that perfection is really something that one should attain to achieve when it comes to a watch that is going to be subjected to normal wear and tear.
Well, no engraving whatsoever, so very flat and comfortable against the wrist. And although it's got a bubble back profile to it, as you can see, it's only 12.7, so it does
only 12.7, and so 12.7's only, but 13.7 is, ooh, you know, I just don't, this is just kind of ridiculous, to be honest with you.
Sits very snug to the wrist due to the curved undercut of the flanks. So very well executed.
So can we say then that this Citizen watch, courtesy of Mr. Perez, can we say that because this doesn't have that case back like Rolex has, that this is a superior watch to the Rolex? This is much more comfortable to wear? Come on.
Case back, 300 meters of hermetic seal. And I'll show you the Pro Diver case back in comparison. You can see it has a thicker bubble back profile to it. Mirror polishing is done to a good standard, engraved with the specification. And yes, it is nice to have an exhibition case back showing off the movements. And Invicta,
I can go either way with that. I think once you start getting into watch collecting and you get your first automatic, I think no matter who makes it, even if it's a Seagull, basic, you know, cheapy, no-name, AliExpress $20 automatic watch, I think it is cool to have an automatic or an exhibition window case back. But once you start to collect and you add more to your collection, at some point you just don't care anymore because you're not really staring and looking at it. At least I'm not. You look at it and you're like, cool. And that's kind of the end of the, I guess, the fascination with the case back.
Invicta used to use yellow stickers on their rotors, but they've now deleted the sticker.
I don't know if they're actually stickers. They might be. to me, they look like there's some kind of paint on there. Some kind of, maybe it's some kind of heat applied paint. Maybe it starts as a sticker, but it's not like a guy lining up a sticker that's going to peel off maybe. I don't think it is. Again, I can't confirm that 100%, so take that with a grain of salt. But to me, they don't look like stickers. They look like some sort of applied coating on the rotor, and they still do that. So this is not something they don't do anymore. At the time of this video, I don't know when he made this. We'll check the date at the end, but I think this has been around for a while. I've bought many Invictas that have that particular rotor on it. So what might have happened with this watch is they might just say, hey, you know what? We have a stock of rotors that aren't, maybe they got a shipment of rotors that weren't actually branded yet with Invicta, and they said, hey, slap it in this watch, let's lower the price a little. Who knows? But they still make the watches with the rotors in yellow.
Okay, and actually looks better just with these sterile. Oh, it's not sterile, it's actually engraved with an H35A. But the point is, it looks better without this yellow sticker on it, which was...
I disagree. I like the yellow sticker, but, again, not something I look at. Like, if I got this watch or any watch and I see that it doesn't have a decorated rotor, I'm just like, cool. Yeah, I'm not like, oh, no, doesn't have the sticker. Or like, oh, it looks, like this is, you don't even see this. I like when companies do things a little unique with the rotor, like we've seen companies do like a really big rotor or like kind of like a chiseled out rotor. I think that's kind of cool, but I don't really spend a lot of time worrying about this.
Abhorrence. This stainless steel plain NH35A rotor actually looks better. But you can see the mineral crystal is too thick because they've had to make it a millimetre thicker to give it 200 metres of water resistance.
I don't think that's
there's a
correct,
huge gap
I will
beneath the
that.
Underside of the mineral crystal and the rotor. They've done that to give adequate clearance. For example, some collectors have tried to modify the 8926OB automatic pro diver you're looking at with the quartz's case back because it's very flat and it's stainless steel and thinner. And they found that it fouls the rotor. There's not adequate clearance between the underside of the stainless steel caseback used on the quartz and the rotor of the NH35A. The only way to get the quartz caseback to fit the automatic is by you have to remove the rotor and make it a manual wind only NH35A, and then you can fit the quartz caseback, and that reduces the thickness by 1 millimetre. So if they'd used the stainless steel caseback, they could have reduced the thick.
This is kind of a bad example, but here's a Spinnaker watch with an NH35. Actually, wait a minute. I don't think this is an NH35. Sorry.
Thickness of the piece down to 13, but they didn't. They used this thick exhibition case back with a thick mineral crystal. And it's a cost-cutting measure because it's mineral crystal glazed. It's not sapphire crystal, although it does do a good job of displaying the movement. Now, with regards to the dials...
All right, so he mentioned... Let me go back there for a second here.
By 1 millimetre. So if they'd used the stainless steel case back, they could have reduced the thickness of the piece down to 13, but they didn't. They used this thick exhibition case back with a thick mineral crystal. And it's a cost-cutting measure because it's mineral crystal glazed. It's not sapphire crystal.
Well, why would you? I don't know why one would. To me, it's extremely wasteful to go putting a sapphire crystal. Even if a watch has a sapphire crystal in the front, it seems very wasteful to me to put a sapphire crystal on a case back when you're just trying to show off the movement. Your skin's not gonna scratch the back of the watch. So why would a company ever use sapphire on the back of a watch?
Although it does do a good job of displaying the movement. Now, with regards to the dials, if you look closely at both Rehorts, I'll show you the Pro Diver first to clarify what I'm referring to. Look at the depth of the Rehort. This is a main negative of the Pro Diver. The NH35A is a thick movement. Now, the problem with NH35A powered watches is often they're very thick. They're in excess of 13 millimeters because the head of the piece needs to have enough depth to house.
Right, so he's kind of contradicting himself. It is a thick movement, and that's mainly why they have to have a thick case back on there, not due to the crystal. So I'm pretty certain that crystal or no crystal, that this case back needs to be that thickness in order to accommodate the thickness of the movement. And, Invicta definitely pushed, I think, more of a deeper dish on this watch. If you guys are watching this, like, I'll show you my pointer here, my cursor, like, this area here I always call like a deeper dish. I feel like the face is a little bit more recessed than you're going to find on the Rolex. But this is just how they did it. It's not really anything to complain about. It's just they're not trying to one-to-one copy this.
House the thick NH35A caliber. Look how thick the retort is, and it's notable when I tilt the.
He uses all the proper terms. I call it deep dish like a wheel. He called it, I think, recourse. Is that what he said? I didn't quite hear.
Piece at an oblique.
Don't listen to me if you want the technical terminology. You'll just sound like me.
Angle. You can see the brush satin finished plain retort has lots of depth. The negative is it means the dial is sunk deep beneath the underside to the mineral crystal, and that reduces legibility.
Oh no, it doesn't. Come on. Come on. You tell me you can't see this? This is where guys are kind of reaching. Renault? Thank you, Julius. I probably butchered that. Yeah, this does not make the watch any less legible. I mean, this is really stretching the truth here.
And the deeper the dial goes, the poorer the legibility. The closer the dial is to the.
And I get it. Sometimes when we make videos, it's not. He doesn't sound scripted, like he's doing this like on the fly, which is impressive. That's how I do my videos. I don't have a script. I don't cut things and piece things together. I give you me, and so I get sometimes we may not always describe things. At least I don't many times. Like I screw things up all the time. I'm trying to describe something. So, but I just don't. You have to try to put content up, and you're trying to fill the space here. And so I don't think this is any. This is really nitpicking. I know it is a subjective comment. And one is not right or wrong, but I do truly believe this is nitpicking. One is not more difficult to read. And I think that if you did a comparison with a bunch of people who didn't know anything about watch brands and nothing, and said, here, tell the time on this, which one do you find easier to read? You have some folks say, well, they prefer, let's say one had a different color case. Like, let's say you had a blue one and a black one. You'd have people maybe say, oh, the blue one's more legible, or the orange one's more legible. Those I can kind of give credit to statements like that based on color. But we have two black watches, very similar dials. One being slightly recessed is not going to affect legibility if we're truly being honest here.
On the side of the crystal, the better the legibility because it's closer. The other thing.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? If you're looking at a watch and we're talking about 2mm recession in the deep dish or Rahot, if I'm saying that right? Seriously, why can't you just go like this? Ready? I'm going to demonstrate something. Ready? What time is it? Watch my wrist. You can bring it up a little bit. You can bring it a little closer to your face. Like, does this guy have shoulder problems? Like, maybe he's had a rotator cuff replacement, and he can't get his arm up. He's like, gosh, man, this is Invicta. I can't move my neck and arm anymore to bring the watch closer to my fucking face. Like, this is quite ridiculous, this part. As much as I like this guy, this review, this is ridiculous.
To notice, if you look at the date complication, because the date wheel is beneath the deep dial, it's far away from the underside of the Cyclops magnifier. This Cyclops magnifier only has 1.5 times magnification. On the 16610, it's 2.5 times magnification, so it's better performance. But
okay, so absolutely, a 1.5 time magnification versus a 2.5 is going to be a noticeable difference in the way that you see the date. This might be a real concern for somebody who, let's say you were only deciding between these two. Most people are not going to decide. If somebody's got a Rolex on their radar, they're not going to see the Invicta and then be like, you know what? I've changed my mind. Like, they just kind of know what they want, right? They might buy both, but generally, they're not going to, make a decision based on, all right, this Invicta is, the Rolex, like, here. They're not going to take these two watches and kind of hem and haw, which one should I buy? They kind of already have their mind made up. But let's say you had somebody who was hem and hawing, and they were like, which one should I get? We're only looking about features here, and they had a hard time seeing, then maybe they would say, you know what? This Rolex has a 1 times better magnification. I'm going to spend that 14,000 pounds. It's worth it. Like, nobody's going to do that. This is quite ridiculous to even mention this, but yes, the Rolex, you can see the date better. Rolex wins on this category.
But regardless of that, the date wheel is too deep beneath the dial because the dial is so deep beneath the crystal due to that thick retort. The main problem with the NH35
I can't talk like that. Rehalt. That's way too classy for this guy.
5A is it has a tall cannon pinion stack height for the hands. On the Miyota 9015, it has a...
See, I personally prefer watches with depth like that because it looks like you can look into the watch. That's just I always refer to like one of my Aragons as deep dish because you just like, it's just, you're looking, it doesn't have to be that deep, but they really made the watch for its thickness. That movement really pushed to the back of the watch, and I dig it. It kind of reminds me of, if you guys ever look at, like, this watch didn't exist, at least to the best of my knowledge. It was called the Musk. The Musk watch. Just look for that. Not like Elon Musk or anything like that, but it was called the Musk, and it was this gigantic monster watch. And I think what it was just, I don't think it ever existed. Somebody like made a watch on Photoshop, and Lord knows I looked for it for years. I don't think it ever existed, but that one has, like, you're really looking into the watch. Perfect example is like a Invicta Hydromax. You really look deep into the face, which I personally like.
A lower profile cannon pinion stack height, and therefore the hands can be stacked lower, and therefore one doesn't need so much clearance beneath the underside of the sapphire crystal on a 9015 powered piece. With an NH35 there needs to be a lot of clearance beneath this mineral crystal, as you can see, so they use a thick rehort in order to give adequate clearance above the cannon.
I should have grabbed a few watches with NH35 set before I did this video, but we can kind of look at that. But
pinion, so the hands don't foul the underside of the mineral crystal. Now, clearance issues are not a problem with the 16610 because it uses the caliber 3135, which is a much thinner movement. And as you can see, look how thin the rehort is. Early versions of the 16610 had a plain oyster steel rehort, which was brushed out in film.
What if we were to engrave the Invicta on the rehort with huge Rolex engravings around there? Would it then be cooler?
Finished. This is a later version of the 16610 in 2010. It's laser engraved with Rolex all the way round and the coronet. But just look how thin and low profile the rehort is. The dial of the 16610 sits very close to the underside of the sapphire crystal. That improves the legibility because there is no AR coating. It needs to be close. It has a
maybe it does, but maybe it doesn't.
Glossy black enamel dial, which is very shiny and reflective. But
the other one had a black dial, which is shiny and reflective too. Let's not forget.
The thinner rehort is better performing. Now, the other thing is...
No. See, that is subjective. It's not better performing. It may be better performing to him if we want to nitpick. No, most people on Earth are not going to notice this difference at all. Nobody's going to pick up these two watches and be like, wow, this Rolex is so much easier to read. That's just nonsense.
Look at the date complication. It's 2.5 times magnification. So the benefit of it having a shallow rehort and the dial being closer to the underside of the sapphire crystal is the legibility is improved. The date wheel moves closer to the underside of the sapphire crystal and the Cyclops magnifier.
Yeah, but if we were to head in, so what if Invicta would have used a 3-time magnifier on their Cyclops, right? That would compensate for the depth. Like, come on.
One can clearly see the 3 Arabic numerals is heavy.
We could clearly see the date in the other watch too, okay? Let's not pretend like we couldn't see. I get it if you didn't have a Cyclops at all and somebody who had a difficult time, reading, was farsighted, then I could see like that being a factor. But they both have Cyclops, so you can both make these dates out. Absolutely.
Heavily magnified. It's clearly legible. Rolex used AR coating on the underside of this Cyclops magnifier, but they did not use AR coating on the underside of the sapphire crystal. So again, this is why I say it's a €2,000 piece, it's not €14,000, because look how...
Well, that's not the reason this is not a €2,000 piece as opposed to 14, because they didn't put... It's a little misleading because they didn't put anti-reflective coating. This is fucking pretty cheap to do. They just didn't do it for whatever reason. This doesn't decrease the price of the watch. This watch with AR coating or not is not a 14,000 pound watch.
Reflective it is. This is very poor performance. One would expect a Rolex to have a...
Even that statement, like, I'm going to defend Rolex here. This is poor performance. You can't tell the difference with an AR coating. I have so many watches with an anti-reflective coating. I personally never see the difference at all. So I'm not buying this. Maybe underwater it makes a difference. I'm not sure. Let me know, hey, Julius.
AR coating. The current 126610LN does have AR coating. Rolex used AR coating on the Daytona from 2007, but they didn't use it in 2007 on the Submariner date. This is a 2010 piece. It's one of the last ever made, and as you can see, it doesn't have AR coating, despite the Daytona having AR coating in 2010. So disappointment, lack of AR coating. Just look at the poor quality. It's very reflective.
I'm going to defend Rolex again. The poor quality. I don't like. If you want to purposely try to hold the watch at an angle where it gets reflection, then yeah, that makes it a little harder to see. But who's purposely trying to do this? Who is really in a situation where the AR coating is like a life or death situation where it's like, man, thank God I got this AR coating. Like, this is just another minor, I guess, feature that might at some point make a little bit of a difference. But yeah, if you're purposely trying to hold the watch at an angle that's reflecting light and you can't see it, then yeah, I guess the AR coating would help you there.
Mirror polished applied indices, mirror polished Mercedes handsets, glossy black enamel dial. It all compounds the light reflecting, as you can see. And it's highly reflective and therefore difficult. Now, if you look...
Well, yeah, it's highly reflective. Poor Rolex. I can't believe I'm defending Rolex. Yeah, if you're purposely trying to get the light to hit it where you can't read it, I mean, come on, dude.
Look at the Cyclops magnifier. It doesn't have the same problem with reflection due to the AR coating. The legibility is good. So they should have been using AR coating from 2007 onwards as per the Daytona.
I mean, yeah, for 14,000
So I'm going to level criticism at Rolex for that. Same applies to the Pro Diver. It doesn't have AR coating and it's mineral crystal, which is a clear cost-cutting measure. I would like to see Invicta upgrade to using sapphire crystal on the Pro Diver. The Mercedes hands...
Why do we need sapphire? Again, yeah, sapphire is the most scratch resistant, but these guys act like mineral crystal is really prone to scratching. It's just not. All these crystals are pretty good. And absolutely, yes, there's no debate, sapphire is the best there. But all the other ones, you're just most likely not going to scratch. They're all very scratch resistant. Now, of course, if you have acrylic, yeah, like that other piece of shit watch I looked at yesterday, I did my live feed, that the Ben's Watch Club reviewed. Yeah, that piece of shit with the acrylic crystal looks like crap. This watch is never going to look like that.
Set is correctly proportioned, but however, there's a colour tone mismatch. Look at the Lume on the hands, which is Tritz Night Lume.
It's not a mix match. It's a mix match if you're making the assumption that they tried to duplicate the Rolex 1-to-1 and they made a mistake. This is just what they did. They're not trying to duplicate it 1-to-1.
Luminova. It's another cost-cutting measure. They didn't use C3 Super Luminova. They've downgraded to Tritz Night Luminova, which is cheaper. Look at the hands. You can see it's a lighter tone of Tritz Night Luminova. There's a darker green tone to the applied indices, so there's a colour mismatch. But regardless of that, the dial layout is very...
Mismatch indicates that they made a mistake. I don't think they made a mistake. I don't think Invicta made this and said, oh, fuck, we made a mistake. Just sell it anyway. It's just what they did. I would venture to guess that the Lume on the second hand, the minute hand, and the hour hand is different than the Lume they used on the actual indices, if I'm saying that right.
Very similar to the Submariner dates, which it is an homage to. One thing I actually prefer about the dial of the Invicta to the Submariner dates, they use silver text for the minute ticks on the chaptering, but also look at the text on the dial. It's not white. And they deserve credit because silver actually looks very aesthetically pleasing. It's something I liked about my Tudor Black Bay 58s, which...
Again, that's subjective. Yes, it's okay for him to like that, but it's not more legible. That is subjective. Is it aesthetically pleasing? To him, yes. To others, it may not be.
Which was the blue version. It used silver on the dial rather...
I'll give you an example of why. Like, I have a Pagani design. Again, James Perez. Quartz got me for Christmas one year. Thank you, sir. I was at one point looking to buy a gold Submariner homage watch, and I was going back and forth between the Invicta Pro Diver in yellow gold or the Pagani design. And ultimately, I chose the Pagani design because it has recessed numbers on the bezel. So, in my opinion, I think if one is going to get a Submariner affordable, I'll always recommend, if you want a Submariner homage that's affordable and amazing, I generally will refer people to a Pagani design over the Invicta. Even though you guys know I love Invicta, however, depending on if the price is the same, that's just my subjective preference, just because I like the recessed numbers. However, other people may not feel that way. So ultimately, they're both great watches, but I do, if I had to choose, between the Invicta and the Pagani, I'll usually choose Pagani for this type of watch.
Than white. And I actually think silver looks better. And it still contrasts very well with the glossy enamel black dial. It's clearly legible, but the silver just looks more premium. It looks high-end versus white.
Subjective. Adrian just said, my old DW 5600C has mineral crystal and has been trashed hard and has a lot of scratching that is only visible on the angle. Square on you can't see them at all. The angle. I'm not sure what he meant. I'm not sure what you got mean by that, man. I'm probably not understanding. Maybe on the edge, maybe you're saying, but I think what you're saying is, yeah, you can't see any scratches at all. I think that's what he's stating.
Quality of the printing of the text is high definition, and I like the silver. Chapter ring ticks. I think it's actually better looking. On Rolex, they use white, and the Rolex logo is Garamond fonts, which is serified, and they use white minute ticks, and then the text is all printed, as you can see, in white text. I think it would have looked better in silver as.
I think if we're being honest, I like the Rolex, the color of the lume and the indices on that. It's more of a brighter white. I've never liked when companies use that sort of, reminds me of like glow in the dark, that kind of green paint. You know, it has kind of like a greenish hue. Aragon's used in a lot of their watches, and I've always been like, why the fuck do they use this? Because it just kind of, I think white just makes for a cleaner look. But that's just my opinion. It does not mean I'm right. It's just my preference.
Per the Pro dive.
In this case, I prefer the Rolex color.
So as you can see, the performance of the Cyclops magnifier on the 16610 is better.
Yeah, see what I mean?
2.5 times magnification. You can clearly see the 3 Arabic numeral on the Submariner date. Harder to read on the Pro Diver, which only has 1.5 times magnification. I would like to see Invicta upgrade the Cyclops magnifier to 2.5 times from 1.5 times magnification, because you can clearly see the benefit, but it is
not much of a benefit, but you know, if it doesn't cost Invicta, and I'm sure it wouldn't cost more than a few pennies to upgrade that, I can't imagine the Cyclops would be that much more expensive for one-time magnification. Manufacturing cost on that stuff is probably identical. So yeah, that's probably something they just overlooked. You know, they make so many watches that I don't necessarily know if Invicta would listen to. I just don't think most people are complaining about this, but if they did have a lot of people complaining about it, I would like to see them upgrade that as well, just to appease people, but I don't think it's necessary because I don't think anybody's really complaining about it.
Pounded by the depth of the date wheel and the depth of the dial, because it's so far away from the underside of the crystal.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. You can see, like, the 3 is definitely more legible on the Rolex, but again, you can still read it on the Invicta.
So if you look at the Submariner date, you can see how close the dial is to the crystal due to the low cannon pin.
But I give the win to the Rolex there for the indices for sure. I don't like that green. And I have many watches that have that, but I'll always prefer a bright white lume as opposed to that green color. It's just not my thing. But don't get me wrong, I would still buy the watch with that. Adrian said, yeah, if you hold the watch, read the time, you can't see scratching. Take it off my wrist, hold it on an angle, there's a ton of scratching. Can feel them with my fingernails. Yeah, so there you go. So yeah, so Adrian has beat the hell out of this mineral crystal lens watch. But remember, the key phrase there is beat the hell. Most people aren't beating their watches to hell. And maybe some are. I shouldn't say most are. I don't really know that. But I can just say that none of my watches are like that. I don't have any watches that have scratches. And some of these watches are $10 like mall kiosk specials here.
Stack.
I got 25 years ago.
Height of the hands. Right, so let's test the screw.
I guess it just depends on how hard your watch is. And I always say that if you are very rough on your watches, then yes, sapphire might be a feature or a checkbox one might want to consider when buying a watch. But for $100, does it matter? You know, it probably took Adrian years and years to get those scratches. This Invicta, $100, like if you wear it for 5 years and you scratch it up or you can't read it anymore, like go buy another one. Like it's so cheap. Like, you know what I mean? You have to kind of put that in perspective.
Screw down crown execution. Solid 316L grade stainless steel screw down crown, provides 200 meters of hermetic seal, coin edge finish.
Hermetic seal. Water resistance, folks.
Nice chamfer to it, mirror polished domed cap, embossed with the Invicta cross emblem to a good standard. Let's test unscrewing it. Feels silky smooth. Very good. Doesn't take a lot of turns to unscrew it fully. So, We're now in the manual wind position.
Yep. Here's what a lot of guys have said to me over the years. Turn the bezel on an Invicta. Pull the crown and feel how buttery smooth the Rolex is compared to an Invicta. And I always call BS because of all the almost 500 watches I have, I feel no difference with any of them. I shouldn't say that. Take my $20 Amazon special that I bought just to see what the quality was like for a $20 Submariner. Yeah, there's a quality difference there. Gritty crown. But that's really about the only one.
Let's test manually winding the NH35A automatic. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up to its maximum 40-hour power reserve. Nice light resistance to it, feels smooth, and I like the feeling of manually winding it. Pulling it out to the first click position is the...
Can't say that I think about that when I'm winding a watch. Like, ooh, I really like the feeling of this. You know, I think this is just a little bit over dramatic on some of these points, but the point that I want to make here is that it is smooth.
Quick set date complication, rotating the crown anti-clockwise.
I don't think you're going to jizz in your pants if you're winding a watch, and if you do, I think get some help.
Advances the quick set complication, so it's an absolute pleasure to set the dates on the NH.
Absolute pleasure. Damn, man, no disrespect here, but I love collecting watches, but I sure as hell don't get pleasure from setting the date on my watch. Half the time I barely even set the motherfuckers, and I'm wearing them. People are like, what time is it? I was like, I don't know. Adrian said, owned it since 1992, including 20 years of painting and plastering. Hell yeah, thanks, man. Yep, absolutely. Wearing it on a job, it's going to get a little scratch, right?
H35A, nice positive indexing. Pulling it out to second click position hacks the movement. I've now hacked the second hand. You can see it's now stopped dead. So it's possible to set the time precisely to the second. Setting the time, feels good. Nice light resistance to the movement, and it feels smooth all the way through the 360 degrees, both clockwise and anti-clockwise. Minimal back play in the gearing, which is good. Feels like a good solid move.
Brent just said some people do. You mean jizz in their pants while winding their watch? I don't know, man. If they do, I think they need to see somebody, talk to somebody. What did Michael Jordan say? He's like, stop it. Get some help.
Movement, and of course it's robust. The NH35A is a well-proven, reliable workhorse caliber.
It is. I hate when they refer to it as workhorse. It's like they all are looking for the same. I use it too, but I guess I'm guilty of it sometimes. When you're making a video, but I usually people refer to it as the workhorse movement. I hate that kind of lingo in the watch world, but it is a great, reliable automatic movement. I've always said nobody needs more than an NH35.
Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. The second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again. So let's test screwing it back down.
This is debunking the whole argument people have with, oh man, the Rolex is buttery smooth, and they make it sound like the Invicta is not. Like they're both buttery smooth.
Immediate thread pickup. There's a good interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the crown.
This guy's super fucking classy. I can't talk like that. Nor do I want to.
This is silky smooth, and it also has excellent quality control and tolerances because the threads mesh very well. There's an immediate pickup between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. 200 meters is good specification. They deserve credit. This is excellent screw down crown execution.
That's fantastic. I love that. Yeah, they do deserve credit, and they don't get it from the watch snobs. A lot of the watch scumbags that we see on YouTube are constantly shitting on the Invicta. And remember that these little things that he's kind of critiquing the Invicta on, I've said it many times, if you can take this $100 watch and be this impressed by it and give it this kind of review, take a look at a reserve level piece, right? You have to get past the size because a lot of guys like this would look at that and be like, I would never fucking wear that, right? But if you can get past that and review it, like he's going to talk about the bracelet soon. You're not going to find the critiques on some of the reserve level pieces. Like you go looking at the Sea Hunter, the Salaka Specialty. These are awesome watches, which I'm not going to say rival the Pro Diver, but they are nicer than the Pro Diver. So if you can honestly review this, which is one of Invicta's most affordable watches, and give it a good review, then Invicta deserves a lot of credit for the other stuff they produce.
So let's test the screw down crown on the Submariner dates. 904L oyster steel, coin edge finished, Nice chamfer to it, mirror polished domed cap and embossed with the Rolex coronet to a good standard. It has 3 embossed dots beneath the coronet. The 3 dots denote trip lock rather than a line or 2 dots. So the trip lock crown has 3 hermetic seals, 3 rubber O-ring gaskets, 2 inside the crown tube and 1 inside the crown itself. On the Pro Diver it only has 2 rubber O-ring gaskets, 1 inside the crown tube, 1 inside the crown itself. Hence 200 meters on the Pro Diver, 300 meters on the Submariner Dates due to the trip lock 3 hermetic seals. So unscrewing it is absolutely silky smooth. It's perfection personified.
It's perfection personified. All right.
Needless to say, threading is perfect. One doesn't have to unscrew it many turns.
Well, it sounds like the threading's perfect on the Invicta as well. So I don't see any critiques here, like saying that the Rolex is better than the Invicta. So
before it pops out, and 300 meters is strong specification. This cannot be improved upon. I regard the Rolex triplock crown to be the ultimate. I've reviewed hundreds of.
Well, then, if the Rolex crown and triplock system cannot be improved upon, and it offers 300 meters of water resistance, can't we state that the Invicta is pretty close, right? Don't they get a little credit? Or is it just that the triplock system's not that impressive, you know? Because I would think that the triplock system, if it was that insane, you'd have a higher depth rating than 300 meters when you're looking at the Invicta with 2 hermetically, am I saying that right, hermetically seals in there, 200, you're still getting 200, so
watches on my channel, and this is sublime screw down crown execution. So we're now in the manual wind position. Let's test manually winding it. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. In the Rolex caliber 3135, it's one of the smoothest calibers I've ever wound. It just feels fantastic. Medium resistance to the mainspring, you can feel the tension steadily building up. It's an absolute pleasure. Right, so pulling it out to the first click position.
I wish I got that excited. I mean, you guys fucking know I love watches, but damn, man, I'm not winding them.
Position is the quick set.
No disrespect. Like, I'm not hating on this dude at all, man. It's great that he's passionate about these watches and doing this video, but I guess I just don't get this into it.
Complication. Rotating the crown clockwise advances the quick set complication, and it clicks over with a lovely light click. Nice positive indexing. And it's just an absolute delight to set the dates.
Like when I eat a good burrito, like I'm like, this is a delight, you know. Or if you know, those times in your life where you're in love and you're in a relationship and you do something just, you know, it's just one of those moments. You're like, this is a delight. Like, this is amazing, such a pleasure. I just can't get this excited about a watch. But Adrian said, smooth crown stem I've ever experienced with a Vostok Commandersky. Smooth, buttery smooth, no BS. Yeah, man, that's a watch that's kind of been on my list for a long time. I just never picked one up. They're pretty inexpensive, aren't they?
Feels very smooth, very light indexing. It's perfection. Putting it out to the second click position hacks the movement. I've now hacked the second hand dead, so it's possible to set the time precisely to the second. Nice firm resistance to the gearing. One thing I like about the caliber 3135, and I actually dislike about its successor, the 3235, which is a chronology movement, is when you rotate.
Brent just said, are Vostok crowns floppy when they're out? Yeah, I've heard the same thing too, that they're floppy, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, I've heard they're floppy because, you know, like what's the old I don't know if it's a saying or whatnot, but you know, like the Russians when the United States, and again, if I'm wrong here, you know, this is what I've always heard, when the Russians were like, or the Americans were like, we're having a problem writing in space, right? We need to be able to write in space. So they designed this nitrogen charged or some kind of pressure charged pen at the cost of thousands of dollars, and the Russians just went ahead and used pencil, you know? So it's like, I feel like the Russians are like, yeah, you know, this might be a area of improvement with this, maybe the tolerances or whatnot, so we'll just make it loose so it's like more reliable. They did that. Vostok does that for some reason, which was a simple fix to some kind of common problem, I think.
Rotate the crown clockwise. The minute hand rotates clockwise, as one would expect when you rotate the crown anti-clockwise. It moves the hands anti-clockwise. Chronology movements, such as the 3235, they reverse the gearing. So when you rotate the crown clockwise on a 32-35, the hands rotate the opposite direction to the way you'd expect. Rotating the crown clockwise makes the hands go anti-clockwise.
Rolex always changing things up to be different.
Rotating the crown anti-clockwise.
I guess because the watches are so redundant, I guess they gotta change something up to have a little uniqueness. I kid.
Makes them go clockwise. So it feels back to front. The movement is reversed, the gearing is reversed. And this is something I dislike about chronology movements, the successor to the 31-35. The 32-35, they reverse the direction of the hands when you rotate the crown. The other thing I dislike about the 32-35 is it uses ceramic ball bearings in the rotor, and they're actually more noisy. The 31-35 you're looking at here.
Yeah, this dude's definitely a nitpicker. Like, dude, I mean, I know there are some movements that I have. Like, I have movements by, of course, NH series movements to 36, 35, 37s, 38s, maybe even 39s. I have Solitas, I have Valjus, I have Seagulls, I have ETAs, I have generic no-name brand, I have, Quartz, I have Citizen, I have Bulivas, and I can tell you that some of the movements, like the Miyotas, are noisier. I think because they have I don't think the NH30, I think the NH35 still has a ball bearing rotor, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But I know like the NH35, you ever see the rotor kind of winding? It kind of like gyrates and kind of flops around. Whereas like a Miyota movement, and probably all Miyota movements, that sucker just spins. And so sometimes depending on how you're moving, you can hear it like spinning around in the back of the watch. But like it's never something that like I think about. I'm like, oh, dude, I just can't get any rest. Like I'm trying to have a conversation. This rotor's just stealing the show. Like these are pretty like this is really fucking nitpicking shit. Like, yeah, Brent, I'm with you. Like I never got people complaining about rotor. You can barely hear it. It's like, oh. I can hear this thing ticking away. It's just fine. This is pretty ridiculous, but
it uses steel ball bearings. They're quieter. So I prefer the quietness of the 31-35 when it's winding automatically on wrist, and also prefer the.
Imagine being around this dude like in a library, like if he's on the job, and you can't even I crack my neck and be like shh. I'd have to walk on eggshells around this dude. Imagine.
Direction.
You never break into this guy's house.
Of the hands is correct. When I rotate the crown clockwise, you can see the hands are moving clockwise, which is what you would expect. I don't like reversed movements such as chronology movements. Pushing it back in's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. The hand begins.
Imagine being in class, like if you were going to college or something like that, and you're taking a test, and this guy was next to you. He'd be like, "Shh, trying to concentrate."
To sweep. The second hand begins to sweep around the dial.
In the movie theater, shh. I'm like, dude, I'm just eating popcorn. This rotor won't stop spinning as I feed my fucking face. Adrian said, yeah, it protects the mechanism when undone if you bump it. Adrian knows a lot about watches, dude. Way more than me. I always like when he pops into the chat because he educates me on shit that I will forget. But yeah, man, he says, yes, it protects the mechanism when undone if you bump it. Vostok designed it like that. You have to pull slightly to wind. That's pretty cool, man. Thank you for the info. Mr. Pro, welcome. He says, watch too loud. 0 out of 10. I know, right?
Once again.
Shh.
One thing I prefer about the 31-35 versus the NH35.
Now anytime I go to the movie theater, I eat popcorn wearing a watch. I always wear a watch, but anytime I go to the movie theater eating popcorn, I'm going to be listening for it.
5A used in the Pro Diver is the 4 Hz sweep. This runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. And if you look at the second hand, it's a characteristic of 4 Hz movements. It has that lovely smooth sweep. The NH35A runs at 21,600 vibrations.
My Bulova precision of sweep is way nicer than that. Just saying.
Vibrations per hour.
My Bulova sweep is like a clock in your second grade classroom. Just smooth, sweep it around like nobody's business.
On a frequency of 3 Hz. 3 Hz movements stutter or judder on the second hand. They don't sweep as smoothly as a 4 Hz. So I prefer the smoother sweep of the second hand. Let's test screwing it back down.
Wow.
Immediate thread pickup. This is perfection personified, silky smooth, and the quality of the smoothness of the threading is just sublime. It's the ultimate. I absolutely love the triplock crown. Right, so let's test the 120 click unidirectional bezel execution.
Yeah,
So
I gotta say something again. I just can't imagine like if I was wearing my Invicta, I'd be like setting the time, pop the crown, and I'm like, cool. And then like the next day, I pop on my Rolex, and I'm like screwing that crown, set the time, screw it down. I'm like, oh god, man, I just love this trip lock movement. It's like, dude, you can't tell the fucking difference at all.
120 click unidirectional bezel, scalloped finish to it to a good standard.
This part is pretty good because he's going to talk about the bezel now. A point that a lot of watch snobs always want to tell me I'm wrong about.
Solid 316L grade stainless steel. Nice, loud, audible clicks. Very satisfying to operate it. No lateral side-to-side play whatsoever.
Satisfying, audible clicks. One would think that this guy would prefer a quieter bezel.
No back play whatsoever. It's a nice tight bezel action. Feels very similar to a Seiko 5KX bezel action, which you'll be familiar with. And I like that.
Remember, when he says feels like a Seiko, don't make that comparison like, oh, he's comparing it to now a $500 watch, so the Rolex is going to be superior. Every bezel turns slightly different. There's different tensions. I don't know if it's different springs they use. Every bezel is just slightly different. Some are harder to turn, some are louder, some are smoother. One is not better than another. The most important thing is that there's no side-to-side play and no back play. That indicates a good quality bezel, not the sound.
That positive, loud, audible click, the heavy ratcheting mechanism feels very sprung-loaded, nice and tight. Let's just check the alignment. Feels even all the way through the 360 degrees, which is good. Doesn't get lighter or tighter. Right, so one more click and we're at 12. Bang on 60. The Lume pip and triangle perfectly aligned with the 12 o'clock index and the 60-minute tick on the dial. So 10 out of 10, 120 click unidirectional bezel execution.
Oh no. Oh no. He just gave the Invicta a 10 out of 10. That's the top of the bar. We can't now say the Rolex is an 11. 10 is as high as it goes on this scale, folks. 10 out of 10 Invicta bezel action. You heard it here, folks. Side-by-side comparison. The watch snobs can't say anything about that, but they will try to make excuses. They'll say this guy's lying. They'll say that this is me in the video, that this isn't actually him.
No lateral side-to-side play, no back play, and perfect alignment. This is an example of Invicta is giving other low-tier brands such as Pagani Design how to get.
Yep, he did mention Pagani Design. Totally agree.
Bezel execution, perfect. It feels nice and tight. No lateral sides.
And the fact of the matter is, I don't know how many affordable watches this guy does review, but if you go taking watches like Oceaniva, Aquasea even, another Oceaniva brand, Nubeos, Spinnakers, all the bezel actions like this. This is not that unique. So I'd like to give credit to Invicta for this, absolutely, but most bezels that you are going to turn are going to be 10 out of 10. It's not that difficult to make a good quality bezel. So just keep that in mind. The watch snob wants you to believe that like this is some hard, unobtainable, difficult thing that to achieve. That's why you got to spend so much money. Not the case. It can be had for $100.
So I play
No, Brent, this it's definitely not
back
me,
play.
man. I can't. This guy's too classy. I can't be that classy.
Perfect alignment. This is 10 out of 10. And this is a low tip piece costing €109. The bezel execution is outstanding. They deserve full credit for it.
Thank you, sir. They do deserve full credit for it.
So let's test it on the 16610. 120 click unidirectional bezel. Lighter ratcheting mechanism to it. I actually prefer a heavier ratcheting mechanism. I always think on the...
I'm glad he said it that way because he's right. He prefers the heavier bezel on the Invicta. So preference goes to the Invicta here, right? So again, that's going to be subjective, but a lot of people will state because it's a Rolex, be like, oh, this is easier to turn. Because it's a Rolex, it's better. However, if the bezel is harder to turn on the Rolex than the Invicta, they'd be saying, oh, it's harder to turn, the Rolex is better. This is where the delusion comes in with the Rolex world. Yep, Adrian just said Invicta bezels won't be buttery smooth according to watch snobs. You can guarantee it. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. They are like, I said it many times, so I'm like a broken record. They're like battered housewives, right? You have somebody in a terrible situation, and she makes excuses for her abuser. Oh, he didn't mean it. Or, no, that's just his way of telling me he loves me. That's how I compare a lot of these watch fanboys. Like, they just make excuse after excuse for why the Rolex is better, just because it's on the Rolex.
Submariner dates.
It's crazy.
The bezel execution is too light. I think they should have made the ratcheting mechanism heavier, more.
I'm going to defend the Rolex. It's not too light. It's how they decided to make it. It's too light for his personal preference. Just again, being clear.
Sprung loaded, more resistance. The clicks aren't as loud as audible. I prefer louder clicks.
What? He prefers louder clicks, but the ball bearings are this is confusing stuff. But again, no disrespect to this guy. Seems like a stand-up dude.
Now, no lateral side-to-side play, as one would expect. No back play whatsoever, so it's very tight. But it just doesn't have as much resistance.
I almost made a terrible sexual reference there, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to let my greaseball personality come out. I'm just moving on.
I prefer a bezel to have firmer resistance. I always think it's just too light, but silky smooth. The clicks are very positive, although it does feel very smooth all the way through the 360 degrees, so it's perfect bezel execution. Let's just check the alignments. Needless to say, perfect alignments with the Lume pip and triangle on the 12 o'clock index and the 16-minute tick on the chat
I've
string.
seen plenty of Rolex guys review Rolex, I mean, if we're being honest, and some don't have pips that line up. I read it on Reddit, so it must be true.
So perfect bezel execution, although I think there is room for improvement. I would prefer a firmer bezel action with louder audible clicks, although it is excellent.
But I tell you, subjective, but I would be sick to my stomach if I was making these kind of, I guess, critiques of a watch I spent 14,000 pounds on. Like, if I'm this critical, I would not have bought that watch. But
right, so I'll show you the two case backs. And as you can see, sterile oyster steel 904L brushed longitudinally, satin finish in the centre, which contrasts with the mirror polished circumference, coin edge finish to it, and its bubble back profile, but it does fit low profile to the wrist. It's only 12.7mm thick. Very smooth and comfortable on the sides of the head of the piece. No sharp edges, no burrs, and it's mirror polished to a good standard. Right, so let's do lume tests on both pieces and compare them side by side. So the Pro Diver uses Trittonite Luminova, and this Submariner dates once.
Accent down. I will say, like British folks, I think they would say that we have an accent, but I will say there is nothing like the sound of British folks. Like, they just sound super classy, super intelligent, even if they're not, right? I'm not saying, I mean, you know, we have different people, all different intelligent levels, right? But they always do sound extremely classy. And every time I hear a chick like on TV with that accent, I'm always like, hello, you know?
16610 uses Superluminova. Early versions of the 16610 used tritium, which was succeeded by Luminova, and then the Luminova was succeeded by Superluminova. And the Superluminova, which has a green tone to it, looks like C3. So the performance is better. Superluminova performs better than tritium. Tritium is radioactive.
I don't know if I agree with that. Tritium is radioactive. Tritium is always decaying, so it's constantly glowing. It doesn't need to be recharged. I will state that if you're going to take a UV light, stick it in the front of your crystal, and charge the watch up, then I think almost any lume is going to be brighter than tritium tubes. However, tritium it constantly glows. Like, you could be in the dark. Like, you could be living in Alaska where there's no light for like 6 months out of the year, and then it'll constantly remain charged. So I kind of dig the tritium tubes, but because you don't have to charge them up, but they do have a half-life, which I think he's going to touch on, where they're constantly decaying. So there's a point at which it reaches its half-life, and the half-life is when it's half as bright. So at some point, they will decay enough where they don't produce any lume whatsoever. So that could be a concern to somebody who cares about lume. But, you know, I'm just going to say this before he gets to this. You know, I do think Invicta watches, I've never had an Invicta watch that had a lume where I was like, hey, this is great. Like, they always, I mean, I'd go as far as saying they always suck. But it's not really a checkbox for me. I don't really care about the lume. You know, if you want lume, you can buy for like roughly the same price. A Tactical Frog, a Steel Dive will blow away an Invicta lume for the same price point, and probably even the Pagani design. Oh, and Brent said, yeah, you pretty much only see tritium in the dark, not very visible in any light. I agree with that. But what's really interesting, too, is like I remember I was wearing one of my Oceanivas that got sent to me a while back. The new, I think it was a GMT titanium. And I was like, you know, up during the day in summertime, and then I went to bed, and at 5 in the morning it was still dark, and I was like I rolled over, I looked at it, and the sucker was still glowing. I remember emailing my contact, the owner of the company, and said, "Dude, this Lume is amazing." And it just was still glowing. So I think a lot of times when your eyes adjust to the light and your pupils open up, even in the darkness, a lot of these different materials will still be visible after they have them in charge for like 8 hours. So it depends. Now, I don't think I could say that with the Invicta, but definitely with like Oceaniva, Steel Dive. And I thought that it was something just specific to Oceaniva. That's why I emailed them. They do use a lot of Lume on their watches. But in all honesty, they like the Lume on $150 watches, $100 watches is just as good as like a Rolex, or an Oceaniva. So it just depends on the company. Remember, these are not difficult things to improve on if a company wants to do it. Trey, what up, man? Welcome. He just said he wore the Rolex much tighter. I was going to say that too. He did wear the Rolex much tighter.
So they stopped using it due to the radioactivity, and then they used Luminova, which wasn't.
I don't know if Invicta totally stopped using it due to radioactivity. I'm not sure that's correct, but because there's lots of I think Invicta still has watches that use tritium, and I know Aragon does. So it's not like I might be mixing. I know there was a different type of Lume that they used to use. My dad we talk about this. I think during the war, what was it that gals were using in like these factories, a specific kind of Lume, and they were developing like cancer and birth defects like that because of using this Lume. I don't know. I forget exactly the stories where I forget things, but I know like I'm pretty sure tritium is safe. Tritium? Yeah, tritium tubes, yeah.
Radioactive. Then they upgraded it to Superluminova, which has better performance.
Better performance if you're going to charge it, but not if you don't have any visible light to charge that up.
But on the Pro Diver, it still uses Trittonite Luminova, which unfortunately is poor quality. Luminova is not as bright as Superluminova. Right, so that's now fully charged on both pieces, and I'll hold them side by side. So as you can see,
and I'm going to pause it right here. I know I keep interrupting him, but this Invicta looks much better than, like, this Invicta is going to dissipate fast, and maybe in the video this might not be a good representation because sometimes the camera lens can really pick up a lot more light than your eye will, right? And this, again, I could be wrong. This is my opinion, but I noticed a lot of times when guys review Invictas, they show it under under a UV light, charge it up, and it seems to be decent. But I can attest that Invicta Lume really sucks. That's like my biggest complaint. I think they should change. Not for me because I don't care, but because a lot of watch guys want Lume, right? So I think they can improve upon their brand by improving the Lume.
The Submariner dates 16610, which uses green Superluminova, which is like C3, performs better. It's glowing brighter on the Lume pip, the applied indices, and the Mercedes handsets.
Absolutely.
Now, bear in mind, this is not a 2024 piece. The 16610 you're looking at is 14 years old. So this.
Yeah, that's a good point too, Brent. You know, the small Lume plots, they're much smaller on the Invicta. So even if they were just as bright, which I think we can tell they're not going to appear as bright because there's not as much of it.
Superluminova is 14 years old. This is a 2010 piece, right? So still after 14 years, the Superluminova is performing the same as it did back in 2010. And that's the benefit of Superluminova. Tritium degrades with time. It patinas, which is very aesthetically pleasing, but it also loses performance.
Subjective. I don't think patina looks good unless it's like a bronze watch.
Radioactivity, the half-life of the exciter declines exponentially with time.
It's funny how patinas look great on a Rolex, like to the Rolex fanboys. Patina looks amazing, but then if like the Invicta had patina, they'd be like, "Oh, that looks like a piece of shit."
Right.
It's like this double
so
standard
as tritium gets older, the half-life means that it degrades. So with the Trittonite Luminova used on the Pro Diver, you can see initially it's glowing less brightly. There's a colour tone.
Yeah, Trittonite's something they use, I think, pretty common on like gun sites and stuff. And they probably have upgraded that on a lot of sites too.
Mismatch between the hands. The hands are glowing brighter than on the applied indices and the Lume pip, and that's due to more layers being applied on the Mercedes handset than the applied indices.
I don't know about that. Maybe they use a different material on that.
I would say we're looking at 5 to 6 layers of application of Lume on the handset and only 3 to 4 layers on the indices, and therefore you get the colour tone mismatch. The indices look a different shade of green to the handset. So as you can see, the performance on the Pro Diver is not as good. And bear in mind, the Pro Diver is 2024. This is brand new. So the Tritz Knights Lume on the Pro Diver is 2024, brand new. On the right, you're looking at 14-year-old Super Luminova used on the Submariner date 16610, but still at 14 years of age, you can see the Super Luminova is performing better than brand new Tritz Knights Luminova on the Pro Diver. I prefer the green tone of the Submariner dates versus the Pro Diver, which has a darker green tone to it. So clear difference in the performance, and it's a clear cost-cutting measure by Invicta. I would like to see Invicta upgrade to either using BGW9 or alternatively C3 Super Luminova, which are now the industry standards in 2024. I personally prefer the green tone of Super Luminova used on the 16610 versus chrome.
I agree. I like the Rolex Lume on that. If I'm being honest, of course, which I always am. I definitely think that Lume looks much nicer, even when the Invicta was fully charged. I just like the color. It's just a personal preference. Even though it's brighter, it's superior. I just like that kind of more of a aqua blue than the green. The green to me seems very dated, and yet maybe Invicta could change that, but at what cost? That would be the real consideration there. Invicta probably doesn't have a lot of markup on their watches, whereas Rolex has insane markup on their watches. So I don't know. I don't know if it necessarily, when Invicta's running margins, and again, I'm not privy to how much they make, but I would think the markup on an Invicta is far less than something like a Rolex. I'd almost stake my life on that. I don't know if it's really important to the Invicta collector, right? Maybe it is. It's just not to me personally.
Chromalites was introduced in 2011 on the 116610LN, which I previously owned and reviewed. And Chromalites has a blue tone, which is like BGW9. I think that green C3.
So it's interesting too. I don't know. Maybe he's not aware of this, but if you look at the Lume on like my Grand Octanes, that's more of like a deep like royal blue, which is even worse than this Pro Diver, but it has a nice color. It's almost like you can't even charge it up enough to even use it. So I don't know, Invicta, I don't know if there's different colors within the Lume they use, but Invictas typically are going to use this kind of greenish kind of tint or the royal blue. And I apologize, I don't know which one they're using on that, but it's not always this kind of 80s greenish kind of color.
3 is more aesthetically pleasing than BGW9, although this is subjective. Some collectors like the blue
Absolutely subjective. I'm glad he finally said that.
Tone of BGW9, and they like the blue tone of Rolex Chromalites, which is very similar to BGW9. But I like the green tone. It's more like tritium lume, used on the early versions of the 16610. Now, as you can see, the Pro Diver has now begun to fade very quickly, but the Submariner date is still holding its charge, and the Exciter is working very well in the Super Luminova. Right, so lastly, I'll discuss the movements used. So, the Pro Diver uses the Seiko NH35A automatic, which you'll all be familiar with. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement made in Malaysia, and it's been in use since 2011, so at this stage it has 13 years of service, no reliability issues.
Interesting, I would have thought that movement's a lot older than that. It probably is under the Seiko name, but the NH series, they probably, again, just want to be clear, I'm speculating. I think that Seiko probably designed the NH series to be used in other watch brands to capitalize on making money, right? They want to, it's a smart business decision. You make a good quality movement that's used in a lot of your other Seikos. And I know there is a Seiko movement that's identical to the NH35. It's just for purposes of being used in other watches that are not branded Seiko, you'll find the NH35, but it's the same movement.
Whatsoever.
So the actual movement has probably been used a lot longer than that date. They probably started producing the NH35 for commercial purposes around that time. Welcome, Dean. He says, hard to beat an Invicta Pro Diver for the price point. Love mine. Many people know I bought one off the back. Seeing mine, absolutely, man. It's pretty hard. I mean, there's a lot of really great value watches out there. Pagani, Steel Die being one of them. It's comparable, I'd say, to Invicta. We start looking at other brands like Oceaniva, you know, who I'm affiliated with, Spinnaker, brands like that. They're absolutely awesome too. But I honestly can't say, if you look at specs for spec, yeah, the Oceaniva is probably like the best bang for buck for what you get. But it does not make the Pro Diver like garbage by any means. Like, it's kind of like comparing both these two watches. I put my Oceaniva up against the Rolex any day of the week, and I don't think you'd find, if we're being honest, that the Rolex has a beat in any category. But, you know, I mean, for any folk who wants a basic, good-looking, very versatile watch, there's no arguing that the Submariner is a great-looking watch, and there's so many being cloned out there. I think hands down the best value. Because remember, even though the Invicta Pro Diver, you'll catch it for like 100, 110 a lot of times during the year, depending on model, color, all that factors into the price. But generally, this specific 8926 OB, I've seen around holidays for $65 on Amazon, and that is fucking the best value, hands down, on earth for a watch.
However, it's a good, robust movement. It has 24 joules and it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. 40-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. It has hand winding and hacking, which is used for complications, and a quick set date complication, which I showed you. The stated accuracy of the NH35A is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so rather wide accuracy range. However, I'm pleased to report that Invicta are well regulating the NH35As they're using in the Pro Diver. This one is running consistently at +7 seconds per day, which is actually excellent.
So Invicta, now whether or not that's just one, be very clear here, just because that's what his NH35 is running from Invicta, doesn't mean every NH35. I don't know if Invicta's regulating their watches. I venture to guess they're not. I think that rating's probably coming directly from Seiko. So you might have ones that are regulated better or worse. But generally, they're all going to tell time reasonably well. You're not going to get one and be like, dude, I can't make it to work on time. Your boss is like, why are you taking longer breaks? It's like, you're not going to have any of that shit happen. So remember, there is a video, I think it was Richard Perret Watchmaker. He regulated this watch to COSC specifications, +1, +2, +1, was it +1, -1, or +2, -2, per day. Help me, guys. Again, making it within Rolex specifications. So
+7 is well within the -20 to +40 stated accuracy, and it's perfectly acceptable for an NH35A. So good, reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. The NH35A is the correct choice at this price point.
Brent just said, I doubt you get regulation for cheap as I venture to agree with you on that. I think he just got one that's a little bit more accurate just out of the box. I think you are going to find with the NH35 kind of they probably have a worst case scenario accuracy, right? And you might get ones better. I don't think you'll get one worse unless something's wrong with it. And then I was going to catch up on a couple more of these comments here. Angel had a retracted message. I didn't catch it. And Jake, welcome. He just said just got the Crystal Reward 12. And then Brent said, I have been looking at those. Jake, pretty cool.
€109, and I really like the movements. So let's discuss the movements in my 16610. This uses the Rolex Caliber 3135 automatic, which has been in use since 1988. So it's a reliable, well-proven, outstanding caliber, one of the greatest Rolex calibers ever made. I regard the 3135 as a perfect automatic movement. The build quality,
I'd like to know why, but
quality control, reliability, and the finishing of the 3135 are sublime. Because it's been in use since 1988 and until it was discontinued in the 2010 16610 you're looking at here, it's well proven. No reliability issues whatsoever. It's a quiet movement, quieter than the successor, the Chronology version, which is the 3235, which uses ceramic ball bearings in the rotor. I prefer, as I've detailed, the steel ball bearings used in the 3130.
That's right. Don't be wearing that new Rolex to the theater eating that popcorn. This motherfucker's going to tell you to shut the fuck up.
Because the rotor is quieter. The other thing I prefer about the 3135 used in this piece versus its successor, the 3235, as I've detailed, is the chronology movement reverses the gearing, so the hands move the opposite way to the crown. This one is correct. When you rotate the crown clockwise, the hands move correctly. The 3135 has 31 joules.
Honestly, Rolex probably did that to like, I swear to God, Rolex probably changed the way the movement works in the newer Rolexes in order to drive the price up. Because people nitpick, obviously we can see it happening here. People are like that bent out of shape about little nitpick things. Like, oh, I can't stand that when you wind the watch, it goes the opposite direction. So the Rolex is probably like, you know what? Let's kind of like kill the price a little bit on the newer Rolex watches, and it'll drive the old Rolexes up. You know what I mean? It's probably, I wouldn't doubt it if there was some strategic marketing reason on why they did that.
Runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. 48-hour power reserve, so that's an advantage it has over the NH35A. It has an...
Yeah, you have an 8-hour additional power reserve. It is an advantage, but for what? If you're wearing the watch, if you're wearing the watch, there's no reason to have more power reserve, right? The only reason that power reserve might come in handy is if you're taking your watch off for several days, right? So again, for somebody like me, and if you are affordable watch collectors, I think generally most people have a lot of watches. I have close to 500 now. You know, my watches, it doesn't matter how many. Some of my watches, the way that I wear them, like I need a 6-month power reserve for them to keep the time. So like, it's just not really a concern for me, and I don't really think it's a concern for most people. It's just another thing Rolex is say, hey, we have a little more here, little things that kind of rationalize you paying, 10 times the price.
Additional 8 hours of power reserve. The NH35A has 40 hours. This has 48.
It's like having windows in your car, right? That are power windows. And like, next thing you know, Honda's like, well, we have the EX model and the windows roll up 3 seconds faster. It's like, yeah, but do I really need that for that extra price?
Hand winding and hacking are useful complications. Quick set date complication is also useful. This is COSC chronometer certified, and it's also certified by Rolex themselves as a superlative chronometer. So what that means is it's tested to -2 to +2 seconds per day, superlative chronometer accuracy. Now, this caliber 3135 used to have a 5-year service interval, but it's now 10 years because after 2010, when the movement was updated to the caliber 3235, Rolex also upgraded the lubricants used in their calibers. So this now uses a high performance lubricant, and what that means is it's extended the service interval from 5 years to 10 years. So previously you had to get the movement serviced every...
Rolex is like, we made improvements with the lubricant. We have a special lubricant. You see some dude like kicking an empty can of like 10W30 Pennzoil out of the shot.
5. Now it's every 10 years, so that's good. And that's just due...
That's probably due to the onset of like synthetic lubricants and stuff like that. I would think probably has something to do with it.
Due to changing the lubricants, Rolex creating a high performance lubricant for use in their chronology movements such as the caliber 3235, which can also, the same lubricant can be used in this, the 3135. So it's excellent, 10-year service interval, reliable, chronometer accurate.
My Invictas have like a 100-year service interval. You know why? Because I'm never going to fucking get them serviced.
And it's quieter than the 3235. No negatives to it whatsoever.
Yeah, Adrian brought up a good point. He says not just Rolex, but I'm guessing any watch that has a high beat rate needs more service more often. It's a question mark. I'm not sure. It's another cost with my Seikos I don't have to worry about. Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm not worried about servicing ever. My watch stops working. I'm just like, okay, I'll wear one of the other $499.
48 hours of power reserve is excellent.
Angel just said Rolex is king, but I'm not shelling out $14K for a watch. I don't think Rolex is king at all. See, and this is kind of like, and I'm not, again, like not dissing on you, my man, but Rolex, how can one say Rolex is king when this Invicta is so close? You know? So, I mean, I love the versatility of Submariner, always wanted one. Thank God for Invicta to get to enjoy the design. Yeah, there's so many other brands besides Invicta that make watches that look like this, that are going to give you even slightly better quality Invicta, better lume, better crystal, a little thinner, profile. All the things that he's pointing out that were sort of like subjective negatives. Like Invicta's not the only player here, But as far as saying Rolex is king, I think Rolex is far from king because it's just outrageously expensive for what you're actually getting. You're getting a watch that tells time marginally better than a $100 watch. And marginally, you know, most things he said were subjective in this video. So,
and in use since 1988, it's well proven. It's my favourite Rolex caliber of them all. So
I'm glad he did a video because this guy's definitely a guy. He's not a snob, you can tell. Like, he's a guy who definitely really likes the Rolex brand, and it's refreshing to hear an honest review about the quality of Invicta and the quality of Rolex.
So I'll summarise both pieces. What do I think of them overall? Well, the watch on the left is clearly excellent value at €109. It's a good homage to the watch.
$65 USD on sale Christmas time.
On the right, the 16610. The watch on the right is clearly excellent quality, but it's poor value.
But clearly both are excellent quality, because I haven't heard anything in this video, side-by-side comparison, that really makes the Rolex superior quality. Slight differences. And a lot of those differences had to do with the case back and how thick it was and that extra millimeter. You know, he preferred the bezel action on the Invicta. The Lume was better on the Rolex. You know, he gave the Invicta's crown action and movement a 10 out of 10. So if we assume the NH35 and the way the crown engages the crown stem and all that stuff in the Invicta, if that's a 10 out of 10, the way that feels buttery smooth, then let's safe to assume the Rolex is also a 10 out of 10. So how is Rolex king? To me, if Rolex is king, then this Invicta is queen, right? There's only slight differences which make this Rolex slightly better. The key word here is that this Rolex is slightly superior than the Invicta, you know? And we're just being real here.
As I said at the start of this review, I regard it as a €2,000 price point piece. The quality and the value of this watch should be €2,000.
Yep, there you go, man. Watch snobs going to hate that because they all say that you have to spend this money to get this quality. And this is just another example that I constantly keep bringing out onto YouTube on why Rolex is overpriced. It's not a good value. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't buy it. I understand that I can kind of fantasize, right? Because about having a Rolex on my wrist, right? And I've had many, we'll call them homage. I think you know what I mean by that, right? The non-homage watches, right? On my wrist. And I will state that there is an allure, even for me who would never buy one, that when you have one, like if I picture myself sitting here with a Rolex on my wrist now, look down, there is a level I can see of having pride of knowing that that watch costs that much. And it almost is a type of watch brand that commands a little bit of a certain level of respect from some people. Now, I look at it and say, and on the flip side of that, it also commands like delusion, right? It's like, oh, wow, dude, you spent 14 grand on that watch that's only marginally better than the $100 watch. Like, you have to have your head examined. And that's generally where I go with it. But I do know that if you have one on your wrist, that there is a feeling you get of classiness. And I think that's ultimately what you're buying for, what you're paying for, and they know it when you buy a Rolex, not the quality. Although it's a quality watch, you're not paying for quality, you're paying to play.
Of course, it's appreciated because it's been discontinued and it's now €8,500 to €14,000, but it's not a €14,000 watch. It's a €2,000 piece retailed at a higher price point.
Yeah. Yep.
The Pro Diver is a good watch for €109. Yes, it does have some shortcomings.
Sounds like that Invicta Pro Diver would be a good watch at $1,000. Because I'm not hearing anything that really makes this Rolex superior to this Invicta. Marginally better.
The Lume is poor quality, the lack of AR coating, mineral crystal, doesn't have sapphire, and it only has 1.5 times magnification, hollow end links, and of course mirror polished sensor links. And
remember, some of these are subjective. He's blazing through these. Air coating, not necessary. Mineral crystal, yeah, sapphire is better, but not necessary if you're not going to be hard on your watch. Polished center links, subjective. I like the polished center links. Hollow end link, yeah, okay, I'll give him that, but there's many watches slightly more that you can get that have solid end links. I believe Pagani being one of them. In addition to that, if you go looking at some of the Invictas that, again, may not be this guy's style, go take a look at like a Sea Hunter. Like, the build quality is even better than this Invicta Pro Diver. So Invicta gives you a lot of quality for your money.
The bracelets are the last thing I want to discuss. The bracelet on this Pro Diver rattles because it uses push pins as a cost-cutting measure rather than screw pins, and
That's not necessarily true. That push pins don't necessarily have to. I don't think this rattles. I think, go compare this to a Jubilee bracelet by Rolex. Like, that rattles like a mofo. So, again, that's just part of how they engineered this bracelet. Yeah, having screws wouldn't necessarily make this less flexible. I could take a push pin put together Sea Hunter or Grand Octane or one of the other many Invicta brands that don't do that. So, and they're not that much more money.
The cumulative effect of there being lots of play in every single screw push pin is that every link rattles. If you look at the end links, there's also a lot of play because the hole in the center link in the bracelet is too large. So around the spring bar, there's lateral, longitude.
A little bit, right? Look at this watch by Spinnaker, right? This sucker here, I mean, this bracelet is incredible, and this is no different than most of the watches I have in my collection. You know, solid end links, like, there's still always going to be an element of flex with a bracelet. That's just that's just how they're made. So I don't think that that's really fair in what he's stating here.
And up and down play. So it means that the end link in the bracelet, which is hollow, rattles. And the bracelet,
maybe in the end link it's hollow because you don't have this, the tolerances are open, right? If you have a push pin going through a solid piece of metal, there's going to be less play because there's less clearance, right? Of course, you're going to have a little bit more movement. This is why we look at like a Jubilee bracelet, and they're all open links, so that thing flops around. That's why they call it, as I'm going to quote the Urban Gentry, which he got crucified for, right? The jingly jangly, right? That's why. It's just how it's made.
Also rattles. So it's a poor quality bracelet despite being well finished.
It's not a poor quality bracelet at all. It's a nice quality bracelet. It's just they engineered it with a specific level of tolerances that maybe they're slightly better on the Rolex, right?
No sharp edges, no burrs. The quality of the mirror polishing and the brass satin finishing is good, but it rattles on the wrist. Now,
I don't think it rattles on the wrist. It rattles if you're trying to rattle it. Like, look. The Spinnaker rattles. Yeah, I'm shaking the shit out of it. Like, on the wrist, they all make a little noise.
On the Submariner dates, solid end links, beautiful luster, no sharp edges, no burrs, doesn't pull arm hair, feels nice and tight. Screw pins in the brace.
So Brent just said, I want to also make a point here. I disagree with Brent when he says wearing watches tight can also stretch your bracelet. Metal doesn't stretch. Stainless steel does not stretch. It bends. And although they're under extreme pressure, right? And I think I did a video on this before about what it takes to actually, the PSI or the foot-pounds required to stretch 316 stainless steel. And when I say stretch, like there was what did I watch the other day? There was a video showing just standard steel. And they showed the difference between steel and like iron. And it was in regards to a train trestle that collapsed in Pennsylvania somewhere due to some of the lower supports being bolted down to the footings using an extended iron bolt of some sort. And they were getting ready to replace these with steel. And they showed like a machine which pulled these bolts apart to kind of demonstrate. And there was no warning with the wrought iron or the iron. It actually just came to a point where it lost its ability to hold steadfast, and it just snapped. Whereas the steel, and again, it's all different with different alloys, but the steel started to distort and did start to sort of stretch. Like if you take a piece of taffy, it got thinner in the middle, and then finally it failed. When it comes to those kinds of, the amount of pressure, the amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? The amount of forces it takes in order to do that are extremely high. And I think if I looked up, let me just look at what it is, the fail rate. Let me see how much force, and this is going to be, does it take to break stainless? I know I looked this up before, but I think it was something like, let's see, a 1x2 inch bar would take roughly 72,000 pounds. So my point here is, and again, forgive me, I'm not being 100% accurate here, so I just want to take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but it takes extremely a lot of forces to bend pins when they're attached to a watch like this and to break links. The amount of force it requires, you're never going to exercise while wearing on your wrist, unless you got your watch caught on something like in a a environment around heavy machinery, it would rip your arm off before it broke that watch, right? And so Brent also mentions the pins bend. Yeah, the pins can bend, absolutely. And I just don't like the word stretch when it comes to bracelets. The pins can bend, but even to bend the pins, that takes a lot of force to do that. So I just think that when people look at a Rolex bracelet and they're like, look, it bends right over, right? It curves. They call that band stretch or bracelet stretch, but it's really not. It's just because those links are so open, the tolerance is so high that it bends that way, right? And maybe in time a little bit, if those, maybe in one direction, the pin does get bent a little bit, it might bend a little bit more due to being bent, and for whatever reason that might have happened. But I hope I'm trying to, maybe I'm not articulating this 100% perfect, but yeah. And he just said, the metal will also wear over time, creating more space. Yeah, but minor, man. I mean, you're not going to wear, like, you'd have to wear this for 100 years before you actually had any kind of wear that was probably even measurable. Like, you're not going to wear this for 20 years and lose them. Like, if that's the case, then my Invictas would all be, like, wearing Invicta for 10 years. Like, that would be, you would see the tolerances open up, and that just doesn't happen. So I don't really believe that that's correct. And then Brent said, I know what you mean, just the term stretch out, people refer to it. Absolutely, man, I agree with that. They do refer to it. It's just not correct in my opinion.
It's it rather than push pins. Beautiful luster to the 9040 Oyster Steel, but
see, he throws it in there, a bit of a luster. He said it earlier in the video that they both have the same luster. They're identical, 316 and 904. This is where the Rolex community kind of throws these little things in there, like, oh, like the 904 has a better luster. It does not at all.
Doesn't rattle. No play whatsoever.
No, not true. I see play. It's just not as much play as the Invicta.
Lateral, longitudinal, and up and down. Nice smooth articulation.
Remember,
so needless to say.
Again, yeah, he's correct in what he's saying here. The bracelet does have better tolerances, but it's 14,000 pounds.
The quality of the Oyster bracelets on the Submariner dates is far superior to the Pro.
I would say it's far superior. It's superior. This is not far superior.
Diver.
But that is, that is subjective. He's describing his own way. He might think it's a guy who nitpicks watches like this guy does might consider this far superior. So he's not really wrong.
But
my point is, other people will listen to this and be like, oh, yeah, see the Rolex, just Invicta's a piece of dog shit. That Rolex is far superior. It's not. It's only far superior to a guy who nitpicks the living shit out of watches. It's far superior to a guy who's listening to the ball bearings in the watch.
Looking at the two pieces side by side, the truth is, the Invicta Pro Diver is an excellent quality watch, bearing in mind the price point, and the value is excellent quality at the price point, €109 in the low tier. The screw-down crown execution is excellent, the bezel execution is excellent, and they are two of the key elements that I look for when reviewing a dive piece. The Submariner date is excellent quality, but poor value. So I'm going to recommend both pieces to you for your consideration. I hope you've enjoyed my comparison of the Invicta Pro Diver 8926 OB and the Rolex Submariner dates 16610. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.
Excellent. I will subscribe to this channel. I thoroughly enjoyed that video. I thoroughly enjoyed you guys popping up in here and listening to me rant about it. And this is how we learn more about watches. I learned something when you guys comment. I hope you learned something, and at least maybe not necessarily learn something, but maybe I kind of put some things into perspective when it comes to just using some common sense and some critical thinking when looking at watches. This guy did a fantastic job in this video. But the problem is that, again, always buy what you like, buy what makes you happy. My argument's never for a guy who says, oh, I want the Rolex, and I'm not telling him not to buy it. What I'm stating is that people, just like the guy who popped in here earlier, said we're comparing a $100 watch to a $1,000 watch. Yeah, we are. Absolutely. And that's not even correct because this watch is $14,000, right? You can compare any watch, right? If you compare a $20 Pagani, not Pagani, if you compare a $20 no-name brand Amazon special, right, to even this Invicta, we're going to see some more noticeable differences. But when we start to get to the level of quality that I talk about all the time, quality is not like this steep curve. It's a curve that goes from affordable watches. Once you have good quality, the curve starts to go like this towards your luxury brands. It's minor differences. It's not like Invicta, Rolex. That's not the way it works. And people who say that are just frankly full of shit or delusional, right? You're either lying or delusional. That's the only explanation for it. Or naive. I should say it's a 3. Naive. And maybe when you actually explain things to them a little bit more, they start to understand that, yeah, that does make sense. But you have to have the critical thinking and the honesty to be able to recognize that. So, great job on WR4k. Kudos to him for making this video. And again, thank you guys for popping into the chat and expressing your thoughts. It's always a pleasure to see the usual names in here. Adrian, awesome that you keep popping in, man. It's great. And, you know, like I said, drop a comment on the video. Information like this is definitely helpful to folks looking to get into collecting watches. You don't need a degree. You don't need to be super smart. You just need to know what you like, know what decent quality, good quality is, and just buy what you like and it's going to make you happy. So thanks for watching, folks. Have a fantastic weekend.